What's up, everybody? Man, it's 6127 here with the one and only Don Montoya. What's going on, man? Good to see you.
What's up, man? It's good to be here.
So what I do is a WWE 2K stream. When we do CPU Legend of the Dream matches. Is there anybody you wish you could have saw? Maybe they just never clashed. Anything like that.
Man.
And I'm talking, I could probably get almost anybody.
You know, there's there's just so, and here's the thing. Some of these guys may have clashed, just not WWE or in America. They may have clashed overseas.
Right.
I mean, I was a big tag team guy.
Yeah.
And I always, when I heard the Midnight Express might have been going to WWF in like 1988.
Yeah.
Like, imagining the dream matches there. Because you had, you know, the Hart Foundation, and the Bulldogs are still there, and the Rockers were going there.
Yes.
And now you have the Midnight Express. So, you know, I'm looking at something from like, you know, I mean, if you could have the Midnight Express against the Hart Foundation.
Let's see. Midnight Express. What's the download these guys? Let's see. I like it though. What's up, guys? Thanks for popping in the stream. Don Montoya next to me.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Oh, don't do this to me. Damn internet. No, that's a great matchup. I always loved, especially tag teams. I've always loved the New Age Outlaws. They were always my favorite. One of my favorite. They just had, to me, they had everything. You know.
Well, they had that, you know, they hit on that pop culture moment where they were, you know, people were like fed up at that time with listening to Authority, and that's where you got the Attitude Era.
Right.
And the New Age Outlaws were just like, you know, thumbing their nose to the man. Everybody wants to do that to their boss. It's just that, you know,
of
that
course.
pain in the butt.
That's what Austin did all the time. Why isn't this working? Let's see. Let's do other tag teams. You have another one besides Midnight Express? Because it's not working for some reason. Of course.
You know, I was a huge. Do they have the Killer Bees? Because I'm an old school. You know what I mean?
I know. So thanks for popping the stream, guys. How are we doing? So we have Fatal 4. What's up? What's going on, guys? Don Montoya next to me. You know what I do have? I have Haku and
Ooh, the Islanders.
Yeah, the Islanders.
The Islanders definitely there.
There was Haku and
Thomas.
yeah, that's right. There he is.
And this was such an underrated team.
I know.
But I mean, but these guys went on to have incredible careers for a while, all over pro wrestling. But together, you know, this team, they should have had a run with the tag team titles. I think as heels would have been great. Oh yeah. You know what would be great? The Islanders against the Usos.
Let's do that. Even better. Let's do the Usos.
You know, because the Usos, I mean, they're very similar.
Yes.
You know, with their careers, and they're moving up, and they're tag teams. Now they're going into singles, but they're both extremely talented, and they've been in WWE for, I mean, how many years? I mean,
like 2010, 11? I don't know. They've been there a long time. Maybe not that long, but a long time. All right, here we go. Guys, like to share live. Islanders versus the Usos.
This would have been incredible.
Flurry of attacks.
Off my game tonight. Hold on a second. There we go. There we go. Oh yeah, this was incredible.
Wreck everything and everyone in sight, Michael.
I mean, when you look at tag team wrestling,
Yeah.
I mean, you've had guys that have been tag team specialists for their whole career.
Right.
And I mean, look at Bobby Eaton. You know, he was just a guy that you could literally put with anybody and he would be a great partner. And I mean, to be in tag team, you have to be able to get along with them.
Right. Why do you think guys adapt better than others? Like, as far as, is it just, like, what's your opinion?
Well, you know, sometimes you just find that person that you can, you know, gel with. And it's, like, imagine going to work with your best friend every day and just, I heard stories of the natural disasters, just literally having buffets in their room after shows while other guys are out drinking, doing drugs and girls. These guys are destroying food, and I'm sitting there going, that would have been me. But like, imagine finding somebody that encouraged that behavior and you're making money.
Right.
You know, and it's like, hey, it's not a bad situation to be in.
No. Not at all. Chip 2658, thanks for the heart, me brother. Guys, like and chat live. Don Montoya live with me.
You know, I actually wanted to do a lot of tag team. When I first started in the business, I was actually part of a tag team with a guy named Bad Boy Bobby Blake. We grew up together. We were best friends. We loved wrestling. And when I say we loved wrestling, we used to watch Monday Night Wrestling when it was prime time wrestling.
Right.
And we used to watch Tuesday Night Titans when that was. I don't know if people even remember that show.
I don't. I'll be honest. It sounds cool though.
Now, Tuesday Night Titans was a pro wrestling talk show hosted by Vince McMahon.
Really?
And it's actually showing up on YouTube. Episodes are showing up on YouTube.
Oh my god.
And it was actually a good little concept because like Vince is sitting at a desk and he has the wrestlers on a couch like this. They'll show clips of matches. They would push angles. One of the famous angles that started there, Roddy Piper was upset as usual,
of course,
and he slapped Lord Alfred Hayes, and it like that created such a buzz.
Right.
But Vince McMahon, like, he was always pushing the envelope. He got paid to do that show by the USA Network. They had an extra time slot, and they were like, "Hey, we'll give you this and this," and he would do it.
Was it like a half hour? Like, how long was it?
It was an hour.
It was an hour?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
About 45 minutes. They would have commercials.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard of Fuji Vice and all the Don Morocco, Mr. Fuji movie little parodies.
Yeah.
That's where that came from. That's definitely something you should watch. That would be absolutely, and everybody should watch TNT. It would be. There are some crazy things that happen on that show.
Right. That you don't even. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're saying. I wanted to ask you, how'd you get and why is always breaking into the business? But no, really, how'd you break into the business?
Well, I mean, I grew up watching pro wrestling. Like, my first memory was actually Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson beating Samoan for the tag team titles.
Wow.
And I used to watch Spectrum Wrestling on Prism.
Okay,
that was a local cable channel that would show live wrestling from the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Okay.
On the Saturday night of the show.
Yeah.
And literally from that moment on, I said, I wanted to be a pro wrestler.
I love it.
And I would watch it all the time. Anytime shows would come around, I would go and I would ask wrestlers, "Hey, I want to be a pro wrestler. Hey, I want to be a pro wrestler." And they'd be like, "Don't do it, kid. Don't do it, kid." And there was a show at the CYO, and it was like 1994, and the main event was a local wrestler, East Coast wrestler named CN Red.
Oh my god.
And he main evented against Cactus Jack.
One of my favorites, dude.
Yes, and I remember sitting in the stand watching Cactus Jack going,
dude,
I need to be that guy. And he wasn't even doing crazy hardcore stuff. Like, he was just punching, kicking.
Right.
He threatened to move to Trenton to punish us all, which became one of my staples. I would threaten to move to a town or marry somebody to move to the town. And I remember going up to him and I said, "Hey, I want to be a pro wrestler. I really, really want to do this."
Yes.
And he said, "Well, if you want to do it, kid," he goes, "you got to find yourself a wrestling school." Because there's one down in South Jersey. He goes, "Go find it." And me and my buddy jumped in a car one Saturday and we Drove down to South Jersey. We spent 6 hours until somebody said, "Hey, the Mushroom Factory's down there." Found it. Tried out literally that day. Larry Sharp said, "You pay me the money and you could start." I went. That following week, I took out a loan and I was training that following weekend. Yeah. 2 of the guys that were there were the headbangers.
Oh my God, Mosh and Thrasher.
Yes, they were.
Oh, dude, I love them growing up.
They were there.
That's so awesome. Cool guys.
When you first meet them, no.
Right, because there's always like that competition thing. I've noticed it.
And the reason they call it breaking into the business is because they literally break you. You have to be broken to get into wrestling. And at the time that I started, there was kayfabe.
Right.
Doing this would have been like no. Right. Thinking about it, I even got like a little bit of me was like, "Hey kid, you're not supposed to do that." And I was like, No, times have changed. But that's it. You went through, like, you could train at a wrestling school for 2-3 years and still not make it. Like, you could not be considered in the business if you weren't trusted.
That's a good point. I just know when the Backseat Boys were here, they were like your first 5 years. For them, they were like, you know what I mean? Like, just a lot of learning and a lot of.
It's weird because everybody's experience is different, and
that's true too.
I was very hungry to learn. Like, I'm the type that if you tell me I'm not good enough or I'm not going to make it,
fuel the fire.
Yeah. And there was 25 of us, and I remember the headbangers pointing directly at me because I was like 380 pounds. And they were like, "Oh yeah, his fat ass isn't going to make it." And at that moment, I was like, "That's it. I'm going to do what I got to do." And at the end of it, there was only 5 of us left.
Wow.
And they used to beat me pillar to post. Whatever moves they did in WWE, I took them first. I took them first. Every type of move. Now, here's another interesting person that I trained with. He was 7'2". The Big Show trained at the same time that I was training.
Real quick, Uper, this is Don Montoya next to me. So you train with Big Show, huh?
Yes. And there's now here's something that's interesting, and it's probably been out there, but he was originally supposed to go to WWF. Larry Sharp was training him, grooming him for WWF, and I remember this perfect because it was a trip, and WWF does their Christmas show at Madison Square Garden every year.
Yeah.
So that was going to be his debut tryout match at WWE, WWF at the time. And Larry set up a trip for all of us. And there was about 10 of us that were going to go. Some of us were going to get tryouts, some of us weren't.
Yeah.
And it was right around Christmas time. It was going to be the day after Christmas. So Big Show loves his family. He's like, "I want to go home to Michigan for a couple days, celebrate Christmas." Larry's like, "Fine, but you need to be back here on the 26th.
Right.
He went home for Christmas, never came back. He ended up meeting Hulk Hogan, and the rest is history.
Wow.
So he should have gone to WWF first.
He was, wow, and then he went to WCW. Holy shit.
Now imagine how different he would have been.
Right.
And how different things would have gone if he would have gone.
Right. Because, I remember when he went to WWE, he was a little overexposed. He should be more like an Andre the Giant type, right?
Yeah.
More like an attraction, more, keeps his shine, keeps his, What's up, guys? Thanks for popping in the stream. Don Montoya next to me. Yes, he's a wrestler.
Well, retired wrestler.
I don't know. You guys kind of come back every now and then.
I know. It's once you never really leave. You never really leave. It's like the mob. Once you're in, and that's it. You're not. And I mean, come on, look at Terry Funk. That guy. He was
amazing.
And that's the thing. They want guys like that in the business that are willing to sit there and want to get in the ring in their 80s. Like, I look at Hogan and I look at Flair and I'm like, yeah, as much as I go, no, I'll never do it again, I'm like, it calls sometimes.
Right. I'd imagine. It makes sense. I mean, Flair still wants to get in the ring.
I honestly think Flair wants to die in the ring. That's what he will not be happy until he dies in the ring. I got to wrestle Mae Young and Moolah.
Did you?
Yes, right before they started their Dudley run.
Yeah.
So I was kind of the test run. And those brawls were the craziest brawls I ever met in my life. They were put this way, I would put them in the top 10 toughest wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with. Mae
Young, I just remember all the time getting powerbombed
and let me tell you something. She wanted me to body slam her off the top rope to the floor. Moolah had it, and I was ready to do it. I was like, you know what? If she wants to take it, I'm going to do it.
Was there a table or it was just a straight up?
She was ready to take it on the floor. And Moolah talked her out of it. I ended up slamming her from the top rope into the middle of the ring.
Right.
And when I pushed her off, I looked away because I didn't want to see what would happen. But they would punch and kick so hard, and it was fun and entertaining, and I learned from them a lot of little tiny things.
Right. Oh my goodness. No, I knew they were tough, but I never heard that stuff. That's wild.
Oh, I wrestled at least 7 matches with them with different partners, and they never wanted to pin me. They were like, "No, we're going to pin the other guy. We like you. We're going to pin the other guy."
Oh, that's great.
He's quick to get out of the way.
In my travels, I've wrestled a lot of names. I've run in with a lot of names.
Is there a name that you were in the ring, or someone you were in the ring and you just like pinned in the ring? Like, is there anybody that like? I mean, sure, there's a lot of them.
It was a lot of them, and I mean, like I remember my very first match ever was just a battle royal.
Yeah.
I mean, I was dead nervous, and Nikolai Volkov was in the battle royal. And this is 1994, so like Nikolai Volkov's still a big name.
Right.
And I remember Larry Sharp saying, "No one touch him, no," all the young guys.
Yeah.
Like, "Don't you effing touch him." So we were like, okay, and I wasn't even supposed to be in the ring when he was there. And things got mixed up. I turned around, and there was Nikolai Volkov. So I had to start throwing punches to his stomach, and he no-sold, gave me a punch, and said, "All right, kid, go." Threw me over the top. I'm going, wow. I'm in the ring with Nikolai Volkov, a former WWF tag team champion, and now he's a Hall of Famer. And, I mean, I've got in the ring with a lot of Hall of Famers. Jerry Lawler was the one.
This is what I wanted to ask.
Jerry the King Lawler was the one.
I went on YouTube and I saw the clip and I was reading the comments. And I love the one comment. It's like, "Hi, this is Don Montoya. I was looking for this man. I made me laugh so hard." So yeah, tell me about Lawler, man.
I heard so many stories about him growing up in the business and just off magazines, and back then we didn't have internet, so you heard a lot of stories from locker room stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been working for JAP for a few years, and I was the guy that they wanted to put in against a name. And I was kind of nervous because I've heard stories of Lawler, and he was from down south.
Right.
And I was like, is he going to be racist? Is he not going to want to give me anything? Is he not going to want to sell?
Right.
I'm going, great. He's going to come in, punch me, pile drive me, pin me in 2 minutes. He came in, he said, "Kid, this is your town. This is your night."
Yeah.
It was ECW Arena. And we put on a nice little, I think, a 10 to 15-minute match. I wanted to get pinned with the pile driver, and he was like, "No, I'm going to schoolboy you and hook your tights, because this is you got to come back."
Right.
And I was like blown away, like, wow. And he was like, and he explained certain things to me, like when I was like, "Oh, I want to do this," he's like, "Well, instead of that, how about we do this, and then you do this?" And I was like, holy crap. And I have nothing but positive things to ever say about Jerry Lawler. I've heard some bad things, but I'm like, I've never experienced it.
Right.
And I went down to Memphis for a little bit and never experienced it at all down there either. And now his son, that's a whole different story. I got to wrestle his son also, which I didn't even realize I got to wrestle a father and son.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was cool. I liked him in 2 They were awesome.
Oh yeah. Oh, listen, Brian Danielson was great, great worker, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead.
No, of course not.
We did. We had a little incident and situation, but it was egos.
Yeah.
Rubbing.
Right.
And I got mine. He got his. I got mine, and it was the business.
But yeah, I was gonna say, I imagine that happens a lot.
Oh yeah, and I mean, listen, with pro wrestling, you got guys that are jacked up and crazy because they're literally telling other guys to do what they just harm them. Right. Then you add, the other stuff to it, the drugs and the steroids and
right.
So now you've got every jock from every high school sharing a locker room. Mm-hmm. Fights happen.
A lot of alphas.
Yes, and even if you try not to be an alpha, because I'm not an alpha. I don't want to be an alpha.
Right.
It happens. Mm-hmm. It happens.
You gotta defend yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
Let's see. What should we do? Is there like a singles match? You're like, oh man, I wish these two could have clashed it up.
I would have loved. I would like to see Flair.
Okay.
But I would like to see him against what's his name? He's in AEW now. He used the Sicilian Superman.
Ooh. Guys, AEW, help us out. Can we see Mankind versus Dude Love versus Cactus Jack? That's funny. We might have to do that. Ooh. But before that, AEW, what's his
Cesaro. He would do the.
Oh, okay. Let me see here.
And I met him once or twice when he first started.
Yeah. Cesaro, was that his name?
Yeah, I believe so.
So this is like community creations where you can get like anybody, and like long story short, as a gamer, this annoys me because it should work. And see the bottom right where it's like loading. Sometimes it doesn't work.
I'm an old school gamer where before download you had to make your character, and I used to play the old Fires Pro. And I remember when somebody told me, "Oh, if you go on online," and this is before Facebook and like the internet was at its infancy.
Right.
So like you have to type it all in. They'd be like, "Oh, they have instructions on how to make characters." So we would print out instructions. And,
I love that.
And it would be like 500 different boxes that you would have to bring up and hit specific numbers, but at the end, it would look exactly like that person.
Wow. What was that like? Was that N64? Do you remember what console?
Oh, PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2? Okay.
Oh yeah. Every independent pro wrestler on the East Coast had PlayStation 2
Hell
and
yeah.
Fire Pro Wrestling 2.
Yes.
We all went to the same guy to get our PlayStation chipped.
Love it.
It was funny because we would meet. If you wanted it, you had to meet the guy at a Denny's. So we would meet at the Denny's, give him the money, he would take off and eat, and then we'd meet him at the Denny's the week later.
Oh my, Denny's was the spot to get your PlayStation chip?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the cops would be, if they drove by, they'd be like, why is there like 20 humongous guys all walking out with PlayStations from Denny's?
Just an eating competition? No, they just want PlayStations.
But I was such a serious gamer that I would bring my PlayStation 2 with me on the road.
Oh, I love, dude.
Yeah, so other guys are out partying. Me, Quackenbush, and Reckless are playing, Fire Pro Wrestling at a hotel till like 3 a.m.
So awesome.
Yeah, we'll show up tired from games and other guys, But listen, we were not immune to craziness, even though we kept to ourselves. We were in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I remember it was Quack, myself, and Reckless, and we're sitting in our room playing, and it's one of those it's a motel where the doors are all on the outside.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there, and it's about 2 a.m, and there's a frantic banging at our door. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I'm the biggest guy, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to go answer. And I'm like, hello. And I open the door, and there's this guy there. He's like, hey. He goes, did you see a guy in underwear running around, screaming and yelling? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, me and my girlfriend were having sex. And this guy kicked in the door, sat in a chair, and started criticizing and critiquing us. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And as I'm speaking to this guy, there's the guy running in his underwear, screaming and yelling.
Oh my God.
Then he looks at us and starts running and screaming towards us. Ends up in our room. Reckless Quack and myself have to tackle him to the ground. We have him in a hole. They call the cops. 20 minutes later, he's on the bed crying about his family and his life, and I'm trying to give him therapy to help him out. So even if you chill out in your room playing video games, wackiness in pro wrestling follows you.
Can't get away from it. Oh my God, that's so funny. And what were you saying? How did you connect it? There was like a receiver? Like it was a different way to do it?
Well, yeah. There was, I mean, there was stuff that you could go buy. There was a place called Radio Shack.
Oh yeah? I remember that place.
And Radio Shack had a little splitter that you would hook up, buy a little 2 wires. You could do that. It was easy to hook up. We used to do it all the time.
So awesome. No, dude, yeah, I remember bringing my console like my grandma's house. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I used to do shit all the time.
Oh, I used to work overnight sometimes at my job as a institutional operator. So I would have to answer the phones. But from midnight to 8, there's really not that many calls.
Right.
So I asked my boss, like, hey, can I bring my PlayStation in to play? And she's like, as long as you pause it. I played it for ages. Getting paid for it.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're gonna do a rumble. Come on. All right, let's see. Let's get some old school heads in here. Let's do. Guys, you have any suggestions on the rumble? Let me know. Yeah, now you can do, which is cool. I mean, you can do intergender now, which is new. Not new, but new for this game. Let's do Batista. Let's do Ric Flair.
They have a great Buddha.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Awesome. We'll put them in.
You should do all the old school guys, like
Oh yeah, we can.
Fatu and like the High Chief Peter Maivia.
All right.
Because like they're in the game. And how often do people play? Like, see, you got Pooh.
There was a there's your boy Thrasher. There was a Bloodline showcase, so they'll do like showcase matches, and they put, it's really cool. They put the whole Bloodline in.
You know, it's funny because I saw Harley Race, and then I saw Hulk Hogan, and to think, you know, people go, oh, Ric Flair against Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, you know, NWA versus WWF, and I'm like, kind of. Harley Race versus Hulk Hogan was NWA versus WWF because he was a multiple-time champion.
Right.
And going into when he went to WWF, I always felt that they should have played that up more.
Yes.
You know, like, I mean, I look back at so many of the older shows and it's like, wait a minute, I totally forgot Terry Funk and Dory Funk were a tag team in WWF.
Right. No, I know. It's crazy. Like how there's so much. Like long story short, I was into wrestling when I was a kid. This game brought me back into it. I'm so happy it did. But there's so many wrestlers and there's so much information, so many feds. It's like crazy to me.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, I mean it's like I look at the opportunities for guys to wrestle, and I'm like, man, they could wrestle every single weekend and not be in front of the same crowd twice.
Right.
You know, and you know. The opportunities and how easy it is to get booked because, like, I mean, you have the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was started, I had to make demo tapes on a VHS tape.
Oh my God!
And we had to mail those out. Now it's like, hey, go to YouTube. I
know it's all too.
Oh, you guys
easy
put Demolition in. Demolition was one of my favorite tag teams, and I've had arguments with people because. And I know this might start an argument now, but I've always felt Demolition was better than the LOD.
Yeah.
Now, LOD was first.
Right.
And they had a unique gimmick, but when it came down to work rate and how to wrestle, I mean, Bill Eadie, you know, and Crusher Khrushchev were two very, you know, talented workers.
Right.
Now, the Road Warriors ended up becoming great wrestlers, but, you know, when they first started, they were just sloppy, killing people. Like, they started in '83, and it was like guys would look at the card and go, "Oh, I'm gonna wrestle the Road Warriors," and they just
really?
moaning grunt.
They were rough, huh?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Oh man. These guys on here be like, why don't you wrestle? I'm like, you need to know what you're doing before you get in that ring. I don't know.
Yeah, wrestling is it's a unique sport. I will always call it a sport because you
guys are athletes.
Yeah.
There's no. Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know how many people know the true history of pro wrestling and how it became the way it became today, but basically it's because of money.
Yeah.
You had two main event guys that were set to wrestle, and then one of them got hurt.
Right.
And there's your main event gone now. So promoters were like, hey, if we have a chance to protect our main event and make money, why not do it? Mm-hmm. And again, like, I grew up watching the original Saturday Night's Main Event. And like, that was like, watching that on Saturday night was like, oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like kids at school talking about it, and you'd have kids arguing about who was going to be this, who was going to be that, and that Monday, I know in my schools, they would keep an eye on us because, the kids at lunchtime would start wrestling, and we'd go into like the jungle gym. The jungle gym, that was the round dome. That was our cage, Thunderdome.
Oh my God.
So I'm not saying I was the one that started that, but I was a dome champion for 2 days straight. But pro wrestling, I mean, it's the cocaine of the sports world.
Yeah.
It's $1 billion industry, but people don't talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like, how do you make these games and T-shirts if nobody's buying them and stuff? But people are buying them.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying the business is the biggest it's ever been, because I would say that was still Attitude Era, but I think they're making the most money they've ever had.
Well, they're making money, and again, wrestling is not only has the how it's changed with how people are booked and wrestling and how it's perceived, but even how they get paid. Back in the day, it was heavily relied on house shows where you had to wrestle 6 to 7 days a week. That was the thing that made Ric Flair famous.
Right.
Because, he wrestled 7 days a week. And
dude's a machine.
Oh yeah, and he would travel all over the country. And it's not see, when WWF started to become big with Hogan, they were only traveling on the East Coast at first.
Right.
So Hogan would do the Spectrum, you would have Boston Gardens, Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens, and Madison Square Garden were the 4 big arenas.
Right, the territories, yeah.
Yeah, that they would do on a cycle. And then you would have all these little high schools and gyms and other little small places in between that they would go and fill up.
Right.
And that's where they would get paid. Now, people always loved Hogan, and nobody, everybody's like, oh, wow, if Hogan was such a jerk, why didn't they do anything about him back in the day? Well, if you main evented against Hogan when he was champion, you would make $1 million in 3 months.
Yeah, right. Why?
So, now, here's how wrestling pay worked back in the day. So you would come in, and where you were on the card depended, is where you would start to get paid. So you might have a guarantee of $1,000 a week.
Right.
So that $1,000 a week you'll get if you're sitting at home on your couch doing this.
Right.
Now, if they ask you to come to Raw, that's another $1,000. Now, if you wrestle on Raw, you're going to get an extra $2,000 plus whatever the commercial percentage is.
Right.
Now, higher on the card, you get more money. So, the champion main event gets a lot more money than everybody else.
Right.
I was friends with D'Lo, so I learned something. Yeah, I learned about his payments and stuff. So he would, if he went to Raw, he got paid. If he went to SmackDown, he got paid. If he went to the pay-per-view, he was getting paid. And that was just going. Now, if he was actually on a show, he got even more money from commercial buy rates and where they were, and from the live games.
Right.
So then when pay-per-view started coming out, you got a percentage of the pay-per-view buy. So you can make $150,000 in a month just doing TV and pay-per-view. And that's being a mid-card guy.
Wow.
Now, merchandise was a whole different story.
Right.
I heard stories of The Rock and Stone Cold getting checks every 3 months for like $5 and $6 million just from T-shirts alone. So that's where the money came from. And you wanted to go on the road, like when Savage and Hogan were at their prime, you had A and B shows. So like, if you were on either show, you were getting paid. And with the internet today, people are finding out that the B show, which was main evented by Savage, guys were getting paid more money on those shows because they were selling out more consistently.
Right.
And then like the Hogan shows would sell, but they were in bigger arenas. But these guys would make good bucks back then. Now everybody's kind of under contract.
Right.
So it's like, you make this amount of money and then you get a certain amount from doing live shows and such, but like there's really not that much to it. Like live shows. Like growing up, I wanted to go on the road. Like I wanted to live on the road. I was ready to live out of suitcase. I was ready to be in a territory. Like I was kind of in a mixed, because like the business was changing from territory to sort of what we had today.
Right.
Because back in the day, you were
in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So it was like I was trained one way and then had to learn how to navigate in a new era. Because like I honestly was, me and Reckless thought we were going to end up going down to Smoky Mountain. Because that's where D'Lo was. And with Cornette, but he started closing up. But that's how it would work, you go to the territory, you work there, once you get, once, you're not over there anymore, pack your bags and fly to another territory. And the territories were pretty cool from the stories, like you would go to Florida, that's its own territory.
Right.
So like, you're not traveling globally yet. So you could like move to Tampa, which is where a lot of guys would go, and that was centralized, and then you got to show 3 hours this way, 3 hours that way, an hour and a half that way, boom, every night. So that was the benefits of the territory. Now you made some good money, but of course Vince McMahon started making crazy stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, dude, I was doing some research on that. And like, the whole territory was interested, like Mid-South and all that. Like, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, Jerry Lawler had a show at the Memphis Coliseum every night for like 30 years, and they were all close to or all sellouts.
Yeah.
And when you look at a guy like Bruno Sammartino, like I look at Bruno and I'm like, that man sold out Madison Square Garden over 200 times without the internet.
Right.
Without cable TV,
right.
Without social media, and I mean, I don't want to rip on guys today, but like, how many times has Roman Reigns done?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Right, it's a good point. No, it's a good point. I mean, he was just, one of my most favorite wrestlers, and it's just amazing, like you said, without internet, without TV, like without any of that shit. Like,
these guys had they had to promote this stuff,
right?
And it's I used to hear stories from the old timers that were trained with these guys. There was a guy named Baron von Hess. When I was 20, he was like 78, and he was telling us stories of how he would get stabbed with knitting needles that were like that long, like old ladies, and they would bring him to the arena and they would stab him and he would show a scar to his leg. Because he played a German soldier.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Dude.
I remember I worked for the Insane Clown Posse when I first started promoting wrestling.
Yeah, JCW, okay.
Way back in the day.
Right.
And I worked a match, and I remember, and I love those guys. And I will always speak positively of those guys. They always treat me with respect. One of the first few people to fly me out someplace and pay for like a hotel and stuff. I was like, wow, that's like royalty.
They definitely did it.
Oh yes. And I remember they wanted me to heal it up. And we were in St. Andrew's Hall. And they actually told me to tone it down afterwards because I healed it up so bad that they had to evacuate the balcony because people were stomping there and they had to shut it down for a year to repair it. But I lose the match, I roll out the ring, and I'm laying in the aisleway. It was like a little ramp, and the light shining on me. And this guy hopped over me. ICP security saw it, grabbed this guy, yanked him to the back. And by the time I got back there, whew, they had taught him a lesson. It was scary.
Yeah, dude, I'll bet. Uncle Bean says hello, Don Montoya.
Hello, Uncle Bean.
Dude, no, that's like I just remember hearing stories like, did you ever meet Cornette? Did you ever, like,
Oh yeah, I met Cornette a few times.
Yeah. I love him.
He's a, a lot of people get him wrong, but I also understand why he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And I used to work for Pennsylvania Championship Wrestling, and the promoter was Blaine DeSantis. And I tell you, he wanted to be the next WWE. And he could have done it. If he would have had the money, he could have done it. But he had a real high-class operation. And he used to play Cornette in all. And I'd worked 4 times in one night because a couple guys didn't show up. And Cornette paid me a huge compliment after my last match. Because I was like 380 pounds. And I come walking in and I'm sweating. And he grabs me, pulls me to the middle of the locker room, and he yells and tells me, everybody turn around. And everybody turns around and goes, this guy is twice as big as everybody else, wears twice as many clothes, worked 4 times, and isn't even running out of breath.
Yeah.
And I was like,
dude,
wow.
Cloud 9.
Yeah, I was like, oh my goodness. But I used to do an hour on the elliptical machine. And people wouldn't believe me. I'd like, that was my routine. Before I would lift every day, I would be on the elliptical for an hour. That was the only way I could handle wrestling the lightweights like Reckless and Quackenbush. And that's what I got booked for, because I was a big guy that could take those moves.
So you could, that's pretty remarkable. You can move with these guys.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could take top rope Frankensteiners. Oh yeah.
I gotta see that. That's incredible.
Me and Quackenbush, we could have a Michinoku Pro type style match.
Wow.
And we actually did a few times in places that shouldn't have those type of matches.
Right.
But he used to like to do the Ultimo Dragon where he would sit and then spin into the Frankensteiner. And I used to like most guys would roll off, I would actually stand a little and throw myself off.
Right.
So I would go across the ring. And at 400 pounds, that's impressive.
Hell yeah, it's impressive.
And a lot of the light guys used to love to catch me. so they would dive to the floor, and I was one of the best catchers in the business. I remember Reckless, myself, and Quack got booked down in Texas, and we got to wrestle Venom Black, Orandu, and Rey Mysterio Sr. And when they found out who we were, they started calling all these crazy lucha spots, and we were able to do them. And they were impressed that at my size, I was able to do them. But, I wanted to be different than what was out there, because guys had chin locks, and big guys were expected to do certain things.
Everybody was everybody trying to be that chiseled, cliche, muscle man. So it's like, you stuck out,
And that's what you have to do. And I wouldn't yell in my promos. I'd try to talk like Jake Roberts, because Jake the Snake, he would literally talk to you in a normal voice, explaining how bad he's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's scarier than somebody going, it's like,
someone who's like even, or appears to be even built. Like, it's like, oh shit.
Yeah. And I see some things like that today in pro wrestling, and I see more of the sports entertainment balancing out with the actual sport. Because you could be entertaining, but you need to, be honest.
Right. I mean, do you think? And now both are important. I just personally, this is how I feel. I feel like you could be the greatest wrestler, but if you can't connect with the audience, if you don't have that that flair, that talking ability, you know what I mean? I just feel like that hinders your growth. You know what I'm saying? I always like Mick Foley is an example for me, because he didn't look the best, he didn't have the best body, but he always talked, he always connected with me. I always felt that whenever he was in the ring and speaking to promo. So I just think it's a huge aspect of the wrestler's game.
Oh yeah, you have to connect with the audience, because they're going to spend the audience is there to spend money on two things: to see the good guy win and the bad guy get beat.
Yeah.
So you have to connect on one level or the other.
Right.
And whenever promoters would want to bring me in, I tell them, bring me in as bad guy. It was a big guy. You know, and I'm like, bring me in as bad guy.
Like the imposing.
Yeah, I'm the monster. I said, you could have me as the monster. You could have me as... I often like playing the cowardly heel.
Like, for lack of a better term, like a chicken shit.
Yes,
deal?
that was my favorite. I love the chicken shit heel. You know, where they would go after me, and at the last second, somebody would protect me or save me.
You'd run. Oh,
yes.
So great.
You know, people, I would love that. You know, but you have to be able to get the crowd to that point to go, I'm going to spend $20 to watch this guy get bucked.
Right.
And I would try to figure out so many ways, because when I first started, my original gimmick was Dirty Don Montoya from Del Rio, Texas. I had a long goatee down his ear, cowboy hat, had a poncho. I wanted to be like bar, Dick. I got the dirty spot from Dirty Dick Slater, Dirty Dick Murray.
Gotcha.
And I grew up watching those guys, but I learned very fast that if I'm from Texas, I shouldn't play that I'm from Texas. And if I'm not a cowboy, I shouldn't play that I'm a cowboy.
Right.
And I connected, but I didn't connect.
Right.
And people were like, what was your gimmick? And I'm like, well, I sort of started to become a Jersey asshole. When you think of somebody from Jersey in the negative ways, that's who I wanted to be.
Gotcha.
So, Don Montoya would have been on Jersey Shore. He would have been one of the antagonists, and,
yes.
And it worked. Like, it worked outside of New Jersey. It even worked in New Jersey. My dream was to create a riot.
Right. If you're a heel, you want to get the most views possible.
Yeah, I wanted to win a title. I wanted people to throw chairs in the ring at me, and security be like, "We gotta get you out of the building." But when you can get people to that point, Roddy Piper.
Right.
When you look at wrestlers today, they start talking about moves, finishing moves, big maneuvers like they do, the Canadian destroyers and all that,
which is cool.
But what did Roddy do?
The Piper cut. What do you mean?
But what was his finishing? He never.
Right.
Like he never had a set amount of moves.
Right.
Like he would use certain. He was just simple. And he could punch and kick. And people were like, yes, I want to see him beat somebody's butt.
Right.
And then people want to see him get his butt beat.
Right.
But he connected with the crowd to the point that they didn't care.
Exactly. Yes.
It was like he could have got. I would always joke around saying, I wanted to be so popular that I can go take a dump in the middle of the ring, and they would cheer.
They would cheer. Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that have done that. I mean, honestly, I think half of Stone Cold's persona and his gimmicks that have come up were him trying to get hired for WWF, which is like the whole what?
It just worked.
And it worked. He could literally do no harm.
Right.
And you have guys out here that can do like Dean Malone, man of 1,000 holes.
Yes.
He was over, but he should have been a guy that should have been more over. Same way with Brad Armstrong. This guy, I don't know if you've ever watched matches of Brad Armstrong. There's tons of. Yeah. He's actually he's Road Dogg's brother.
Okay.
And out of that whole, the Armstrong family.
Oh yeah, Armstrong. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But Brad Armstrong, out of that whole entire family, was the best wrestler.
Yeah.
Should have been a champion. Should have had a long run with a title, even if it was the TV title or something. But he was just that talented. But he just couldn't connect with the crowd.
Road Dogg, I was enamored.
Oh yeah,
I just loved it. I don't know how else to explain it.
And Road Dogg was the worst wrestler of the Armstrong family. So right. You know what I mean? But that's not insulting to him because he could actually wrestle. Like when you're saying somebody's not a good wrestler in the wrestling family, that's like he's a better wrestler than a lot of other people.
Right.
But when you scale it out with that family, you know what I mean? It's like when you take the Samoan tribe. you're gonna rank them in certain ways.
But they all can do it.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
They all can wrestle.
But it was just watching these guys and like going, man, imagine if Brad Armstrong would have gotten as over as Road Dogg, you know, but he would have some phenomenal matches that, like, from a wrestling standpoint, he's like, wow, Chris, clean, doing those 10-star matches. You know, and it's like, you know, you look at a guy like, you know, like Diesel, where he had his set maneuvers, but he could work, and he knew how to work with people. You know, but again, when you get in that ring, the crowd doesn't like this. You know everything.
He steps on his back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Mosh or Thrasher? Which one's that? It's one of them.
That looks like
I
Thrasher.
think it's Thrasher, yeah. Hi guys, how we doing? Hey Queen. No, this is our first thing. This is like, I was always curious, like, just like all this stuff, like all the behind the scenes, just knowing like how to connect. Like, what was your? I guess it was kind of counter. I guess like, what would be like your tactics, or what you would say or crowd, or what would be the thing that you piss people off that you know would work?
Well, it depends on what. Like, I would always go for sports if it was a major town. Like, I was
such a good move.
Yes. I was a mainstay in Pittsburgh for Steel City Wrestling, and the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Steelers were my target. We were actually so popular in Pittsburgh at the time that we beat what's the guy? He had his talk show. Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
We actually were one of the few shows that beat him in the time slot that we were up against him.
Wow.
And
really?
Yes. And Jerome Bettis, the boss, wanted to come onto the show, and he specifically wanted to tackle me. And I was ready for it. I was like, yes, I want to do it. I want to do it.
Yeah, right. It's just,
And his agent and like the league was like, no, we don't want him because he was big at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I had the whole spot in mind, what he was going to do, because I used to wear a Flyers jersey. So I would come out with a Flyers jersey. I would rip into the crowd. And if they didn't have anything that was in the national news, I would pick up a local paper and start reading what was the big story. And there was a town in Georgia that I wrestled in where the mayor got arrested for prostitution. So the promoter, I asked the promoter to get me a girl to come to ringside with me, and I came out with this girl, and I said that she was the actual prostitute that he was with, and then she got on the mic and said that he owed her, $500. So it was.
Oh, that's great.
I like to be very topical.
Yeah.
And I would act like, actually, I was down in Florida during the 2000 elections where they had the recount and the recall, and Florida had the hanging chat. And that way, I got the crowd in Tampa so pissed off. I remember grabbing the mic going, you people in Florida are so stupid. You don't even know how to vote right. And they were throwing stuff at me. Oh, it was entertaining. It was fun.
Dude, that's so great. Yeah, that's so funny. The local paper, that was a smart move by you.
Oh yeah, just pick up the local paper to see what's going on in the area, and talk to local people and just find out, what's the topic, because they're the ones that are going to be there. And once you find out certain things they like, certain things they don't like, they get locked up.
I just remember last year I saw a clip from AEW. It was Christian Cage, and it was right after the Phillies lost against the Mets. And he said something like, "Oh, you guys are choke artists," or something like the Phillies, and it was just great. It was awesome heat, dude.
Oh yeah, I would always think of gimmicks that I would like to do if I was able to do TV, and like I would always want to if I was in WWF with Santino Marella, and
he's great.
I always wanted to do a ha-ha like that. And like I wanted to get him in trouble with the crowd. So like if we were in Philly, I'd be like, look, if you want to be popular with the Philly crowd, here, wear this jersey, and like in a Dallas Cowboy jersey. So it's like, it's fun to know certain things, and it's fun to learn about certain pop cultural things. But then you got to be careful because there was a few years ago, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, and when he had gotten arrested for a certain situation in Colorado, There was a guy who had just gotten a tryout with WWF. He was on the mic, and he goes, "My man's unstoppable, like Kobe in Colorado." Week later, so you have to be careful
Pick and choose.
what things you say.
Right.
Like you want to be topical, but you don't want to be controversial.
Yes.
Especially in this day and age where it's like, you will get canceled. Like I grew up in wrestling where you could burn the American flag because that was an angle start.
Right.
Like I personally would have never done it, but it was an angle that I was like, oh my God, that got so much heat.
Right.
Watching Bill Watts get beat up by the Russians, and then they're choking him with the American flag, and then they lay the Russian flag, and it's like, today would they be able to do that? I mean, I remember Finley was fired from WWF because they did an angle where they had the foreign wrestlers interrupt the national anthem.
Yes.
And a local military group complained, and they let him go. But I was like, that's a storyline. That's an angle. That's where you get the heat from.
Right.
And some people are afraid to push that envelope, and I understand why.
Yeah.
But pro wrestling was that industry that was like, listen, sometimes you gotta push that.
Right. You definitely got away with it a lot more than.
Oh yes. We got away with a lot more because again, a good majority of my career wasn't actually videotaped because cell phones and websites. This type of technology was just not even in its infancy.
Yeah.
Like I used to have to steal my mom's VHS camcorder to record, and like I had to have somebody come with me because it's not like you have your cell phone like. Somebody had to stay with it and follow around. But you had it was a different time, and like look what Vince McMahon got fired for. That was the norm. That was the norm. I'm not gonna say what locker room it was. I'm not gonna say who said it.
Right.
But I was in a locker room, and the promoter walked in. And everybody's in there getting ready for the show, and he tells everybody to shut up, and he goes, okay. He goes, girls, if you want to keep a job here, you're going to have to take care of the boys. And he walked out. And it was quiet as a church.
I bet.
And people were just looking around, and like I remember there was a young lady sitting across from me that I had trained with at the Monster Factory. She was like a class behind me. And I went up to her and I sat down next to her and I said, listen, if anybody asks, you tell them you're with me. You're not really with me, but you tell them you're with me.
Right.
So if somebody, I'm taking care of him. And she stayed in the business for 2 years, but that's a scary aspect of the business. And it's a two-way street. Because, I had a couple tryouts with WWE back in the day, and my first one, Larry pulled me aside and said, there's certain people you shouldn't be left alone. He gave me a couple of names that are out there now that people know that I'm not going to repeat. But,
right.
If you're alone with this guy, don't be for so long.
Right.
But it's like any other industry. People got power and they take advantage. And unfortunately in our sport, you got a lot of people that are in shape. Good. I can't believe that there's not a lot more scandal going on in pro wrestling. Because the women back then do not look like the women today.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like I don't even want to know what they charge like in WWE.
No. I'm really impressed with like women's wrestling.
Oh,
they're amazing. They were like I remember Lita obviously and Trish Stratus and they were amazing, but like nowadays it's really Timmy Stratton and just so much athleticism.
I've been a huge proponent of women's wrestling from back in the day when All Japan Women had their own separate company that would sell out. Like Aja Kong. There was a woman named Regina Bennett who was very popular in Japan. She wasn't huge here, but she was like the female version. She was the American Aja Kong, and she was huge. I got to meet her once. I loved her. I was like, oh my goodness, it's like it's you. But like I used to watch Japan Women. Minami Toyota. She used to use the stretch bra. I used it for a while. Me and Reckless both used it because of her. Mm-hmm. You know, people are like, where do you go? As like All Japan Women. And I used to do a lot of spots that the women would do because guys weren't doing them.
Right.
And I used to wrestle Julio De Niro a lot. I don't know if you remember him from old ECW days.
Okay.
And he used to have really long hair. So we would do an old woman spot where he would grab my wrist and I would grab his hair and he would like yank himself up and then take a big back bump. And then I would snap man him by his hair. But only women would ever do that in their matches. And I'm like, wait a minute. He's got long hair.
Why not do it?
Why not do it?
Yeah.
And people were like, whoa, that's awesome. But it's like, listen, you find different things and you want to be different. And that's what the business is about. You want to stand out from people.
Right.
You know, and Reckless and Quackenbush and myself always try to stand out from everybody else. You know, we didn't think that we were better than anybody else, but we were like, we want to be different.
Right.
So like, you go, oh, this guy, but I remember when that guy did this, this guy did that, oh, that was so funny, that was so silly, oh, that was scary. Like, I wanted them to remember me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they would just do something simple, like I would tape up my wrist and add extra tape, because I knew if there was a lot of kids at the show, I would take my wrist, I would take the tape off the wrist, put it around the throat and choke, and those kids would go crazy. And it was something as simple as a piece of tape like that. Everybody would start booing and cheering for certain little things. And it's like a movie. Mm-hmm. Like if you watch WWF, all the wrestling today, it's become a movies and TVs with cues. Now, I would always joke around, you know, when somebody's getting jumped in the ring by somebody, and then, you know, John Cena's music plays, and he comes running out for the save. And I'm sitting there going, who told the music guy that John Cena's going to come save? You know, did John Cena run by and go, hey, Harold, play my music, I'm saving this guy? Because when I grew up watching wrestling, if John Cena ran out, you didn't hear his music.
Right.
So, you know, it was, and people would look, like now, people look to the curtain to see who's going to come running out and they listen for the music.
Right.
So, you know, and those were like the little realism things. Because, like, we all know how it's going to work out. Oh, he's getting jumped and his best friend's going to come save him at the last minute. But back then, you didn't want to give that idea. You know, you didn't want to have them think that.
Right.
But this is what Vince McMahon wanted to do. He wanted a formula to matches and to shows. He created Disney in pro wrestling. That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like I like AEW's Moxie. I like what he's doing.
Yes.
I think he should have done something smaller because it took Vince McMahon 12 years to get to selling out 10,000 seat arenas on a regular basis.
Right. People forget that. Yeah.
Like he just didn't, you know, sign Hulk Hogan, win the title, and then Monday Night Raw started that Monday, and it was 10,000 seat. Like even when Monday Night Raw started, for a good 2-3 years, a majority of the shows were in the Manhattan Center, which was small. So for AEW to go, hey, we're going to run in 10,000 seat arenas all the time, it's like, yeah, that's nice and all, but like, you shouldn't really do it. I had always said, you know, if I had the money to do it, I would have purchased a building like in Jacksonville, Florida, where he's from.
Right.
And run weekly shows there like ECW used to, you know, kind of like film once and then, but I would film every week live and do tours every few weeks to build up the brand.
Right.
You know, because, I mean, look where they're at now. You know, and it's like, you have to do crazy things to get people into the arenas.
Right.
So for a 10,000 seat arena, you got to have some, but you also have to get the fans to like those people to come in.
Right.
You know, and I like the idea of him bringing in old WWE guys. You know, that was a great way to get people to, you know, like, hey, I like the, you know, look, it's Christian, it's, you know, it's Chris Jericho, like, and I tell you, I watch on a regular basis when CM Punk showed up. And when he left, literally the following week, I could see the decline. Especially on, like, what was the show, Dynamite?
Dynamite, yeah.
And, like, I saw what he was doing. I saw what CM Punk was doing. And I know Phil. Like, I don't know him personally like I call him today.
Right.
But I wrestled him a few times when he first started.
Was that Ring of Honor? Or was that
Chikara.
Okay.
This is before he went to Ring of Honor. This is before anybody knew who he was, who Chris Hero was, and who Colt Cabana was.
Yeah.
And it was the BTS, the Black T-Shirt Squad, against the Gold Bob Mafia. And there's a 6-man match out there.
You knew Phil, huh? Or you know Phil, huh?
Yes. And I know how he thinks.
Yeah.
I know exactly how he thinks. And I know what he wants to do. And what he wants and what wrestling should have evolved to was what ECW was in the year 2000.
Right.
That mixture of wrestling, hardcore. You have that, storyline, but then you have the pure wrestling for the pure fans. You bring in the Japanese guys. You had a hodgepodge of stuff. And it had some sports entertainment to it, but it had pro wrestling to it.
Right.
And that's what he wanted. Phil and I, we have a lot in common in certain ways that we think. And we tend to rub people the wrong way, especially when it comes to stuff that we're passionate about.
Right.
And I always said, like if I hit the lottery and had like $500 million, to spend, I would have went straight for him. And I would have sat down and pitched my whole idea of what I wanted to do to get him to come to me. Because, look at him. He was gone for 10 years.
Yeah.
Came back and helped AEW a lot.
Yeah. Dude.
Went back to WWF.
He's such a draw. It's crazy.
He's talented.
Yeah.
You may not like him, but he's got the talent. He's got the mind. And I'll tell you right now, do not be surprised if he is the successor after Triple H.
Really? Yeah, you think so?
That's who I see taking over WWF in about 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Shit.
Yes. CM Punk. You have people that like certain specific, types of wrestling. And it's like you need to be a successful company. You need to encompass everybody.
Right.
You can't, you could make money and be successful with a niche. Like ECW would have never have been a major company keeping what they did when they first started.
Right.
And that's why they were evolving, moving away from a lot of the stuff that they did, but in a way it also kind of started to kill them. But Rob Van Dam said it years ago, I can't do, the Van Daminator, or cross country every single night, 6 nights a week.
Right.
Like, imagine getting powerbombed every night by Diesel.
Jesus.
But that's what pro wrestling was like back in the day.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of, like, if you wrestled for WWF back in the day, like when Hogan was, in that time, and the Attitude Era also, you were going to wrestle, you were going to be on the road about 300 days of the year.
Right.
So you had 50 days that you were home or traveling home.
Mm-hmm.
But you were literally on the road, like, there were times where there were like 14 days on the road, and then you'd have like 2 days off. Then you're back for 21 days, and then 2 days off.
Jeez.
So like, now imagine wrestling that style. Like, imagine being a hardcore wrestler that bleeds and goes through tables and thumbtacks. Imagine having to do that 21 days straight.
It's insane.
Yeah, like, your body's not meant to do that.
No.
Like, that's why those type of matches were only done once in a while. Because, guy takes a beating like that, you rest for a little bit. And then it's like, okay. You had Abdul the Butcher and, Bruiser Brody, but they weren't even as violent as the guys today. Like, they did a lot of punching and kicking. They would hit with chairs. They would grab, like, a weapon, like, like a screwdriver, just like jab. But, like, they weren't putting people through, glass or setting stuff on fire. Like, they wouldn't have lasted that long.
No.
Abdullah Butcher had one moment with fire. His first and last moment was fire was with Boo Bradley, John Reckner. He was, a Buddha Singh. And he was in WWF for a little bit, but he did a tribute gimmick called a Buddha Singh, which was like a knockoff of Abdul the Butcher. So he was going to blow a fireball at Abdullah. He's like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. It's not going to hurt you." But Abdullah put on like some oil or some type of stuff that he normally put on, and burnt his whole side of his body.
Oh my god!
Yes,
he torched his whole. Oh my god!
Yes, dude. So it was like, and there was pictures like there's pictures of it on like in Pro Wrestling Illustrated and such like that. And that's something that's missing from today. Like the magazines are still around, but they weren't like back then. Everybody wanted to be in the magazines,
right?
Like I even had it introducing. Like there's an issue, I have to dig it up somewhere, but I'm actually in one of the magazines, and they asked about my story of how I got into wrestling and everything like that. Now here's a little side story. When I was in high school, my guidance counselor in the 11th grade, she asked me, like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah. Oh,
and I told her I wanted to be a pro wrestler. And she looked at me and she goes, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yes." And I said, "Yes, I want to be a pro wrestler." She goes, "All right, think about this." And she goes, "Come back in 2 weeks and we'll talk."
Right.
So I was like, "Okay, cool." So 2 weeks go by, I come back, and she's like, "Do you still want to be a pro wrestler?" And I'm like, "Yes." So she reaches and pulls out this little envelope, and she puts it down, opens it up, and there's a couple letters and some pamphlets and all this stuff, and she goes, "Here." And I take it and I look, and there's a letter, and I don't know what happened to the letter. I'm so angry that I lost it, but it was from Gorilla Monsoon. Her neighbor was Gorilla Monsoon. She knew him as Gino Morello.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, Gino gave this to me." And I was like, "Gino?" And then like I read it, and he said, if you truly want to be in the business, it's a long, hard, lonely road.
Yeah.
It has its ups, it has its downs.
Right.
Has your fun times, has your bad times. He goes, but if you really want to do it, you'll love it all. And he's like,
wow.
Get into a school, get your education, and then get into wrestling school. And he left a couple different numbers for wrestling schools in the local area. And they, back then that was like, now everybody, like you could literally throw a rock and find a wrestling school.
Oh yeah.
But back then there was only a few that you would go to.
Right.
And a lot of them were situated on the East Coast. You had Johnny Rod's school. You had the Monster Factory.
Right.
And honestly, like I'm trying to think, like those were the only two.
Yeah.
On the East Coast that you could go, like, because Johnny Rodz was a WWE, enhancement talent jobber for years. Right. So was Larry Sharp. So you went to those guys. It was going to go to WWF at one point.
Right.
But then once the commission closed in New Jersey, New Jersey used to have a state commission for pro wrestling. Everybody started opening up schools. Everybody started running wrestling shows, and you would have a guy that would go to like there was a gentleman that trained at Larry Sharp's for like 3 months. Yeah. And he was really, really bad. And then like a year later we find out he's running a wrestling school in Philadelphia. And he trained like 6 or 7 guys, and like they were just as bad as he was.
Yeah,
So like you had guys that learned certain things, and then they would go off and start their own stuff.
So let me ask you this: is there any advice you'd give to somebody starting out in wrestling who's young kid, wants to get into it? Is there anything you would tell maybe yourself when you were starting?
Don't get fixated on a gimmick. Don't be fixated on a gimmick. Learn as much of the basics and the ins and outs and the workings of the business as you can, because it's a business.
Right.
At the end of the day, there's money exchange. It's a business. And once you learn that, everything else becomes easy because you understand how it runs. Like, I helped run the locker room for SPO Wrestling and Win, which is how we met, and Johnny Cashmere. And one of the things that I try to tell the guys is like, listen, time is money.
Right.
Because you have a building for 2 hours and it costs X amount of dollars to rent buildings So if you have a building for a certain amount of hours, if you go over on time, you're going to spend more money.
Right.
So time is money. Where do you want to spend your money on the most? The beginning or at the main events where the people are coming? So it's like I try to keep guys on their time at the beginning of the show in case the guys at the end need more time. But when you realize, okay, my job when I'm on a certain part of the show is, to do this and this and this. A lot of guys want to be the main event and don't understand what comes to be in the main event.
Right.
And what you have to be in the main event.
You have to become, yeah.
And it like I gotta tell you right now, I look at John Cena, like a lot of people will hate John Cena or dislike John Cena, but when you look at that man for what he's done as a face of a company,
yeah.
I mean, he's learned languages, he's, traveled, given up his free time to do certain things, and that's what you gotta understand, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's a business, and you're going to have to view it that way.
Right.
Your body is part of the business. You want to take care of it. You want to make sure you're able to compete. Because, again, people are paying money to see you. How would you feel if you went out to eat and you're like, I'm going to go to Ruth Chris, the most expensive steakhouse. You've heard all these great stories. And they just slop off a little piece of crappy meat on your plate for the same price. You know what I mean? You're going to
right.
Whoa!
What the hell's this?
Yeah, so it's like my mentality every single time is I want to give that person their $20 worth. I want them to think that when I'm out there, my $20, like their $20 paid just for my match and everything else is a bonus. Get that type of mentality when you're out there. Be ready to put yourself in there and know that you're going to give up a lot. You're going to give up a lot. Holidays,
right?
Birthdays, relationships, because if you're traveling all the time and you're in the gym all the time, a woman, or a man, or a significant other is not going to sit around and wait.
Nope.
I mean, look at Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
He retires and then got divorced. That's because his wife had a whole separate life that revolved around him being on the road 320 days of the year.
Right, when he came home, she's like...
now he's home all the time. You're like, wait a minute, no, he's home for a day or two, and then he's gone, and you got your...
Right.
Now, so it's like, you got to be prepared to sacrifice a bunch of stuff. And, it may be worth it. It may not.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, do you find it worth it? And I'm like, in what way? You know what I mean? Like, I love the pro wrestling business. I love everything about it. I don't agree with it on some things, and sometimes, and you fight with it sometimes. But I never expected to make millions out of it, so I'm not looking for millions.
Right.
If it would have come my way, I wouldn't have, certainly wouldn't have said no to it.
Right.
But I also knew if I would have worked for a major company with the politics going on, I wouldn't have liked it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because fans have heard some stories.
Right.
I've never been in the WWF to the point that I could hear or see the stories that happen, but I've been with guys that have known.
Yes.
And so it's like I'm hearing secondhand information, and like you tend to know what's real and what's not when you hear certain things repeated over and over and over and over.
Right.
So like there's so many things that happen in pro wrestling. And like some people will go, oh, this guy was only there for 2-3 years and then he left and he went to do something else. And it's like, when you love something and you love it so much and then it starts becoming a burden to you. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to be involved in wrestling and not have to have it be my source of income.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because then I can enjoy it more.
Right.
I could be like, well, if this show doesn't work, or if this gimmick doesn't, but, a guy that's making a living out of it, his gimmicks have to work, because if they don't, he's going to get fired and such. But, that aspect, it becomes, especially when you go to a major company, like AEW or WWE, and it's like, you got to do what they tell you. And I mean, I've worked in the business how it's being run by WWF, because like everybody follows WWE's because they're the guys.
It's just huge.
And then I hear stories about what goes on with AEW, and I'm like, how does he do that if he's not? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I mean, he should have called Cornette.
Yeah.
He should have called Cornette. He shouldn't have done everything Cornette would have told him to do.
Right, but guidance under his,
Because I always say, if somebody gave me a ton of money to start a company, that could be the first call. But like, James E., I need your help with something. But this business it's a rough business. It's like anything else. It's like rock and roll.
Yeah.
You're gonna.
That's a good example.
It is. You're gonna travel a lot. You're gonna play in a lot of shitty places. Mm-hmm. You're gonna have people that aren't gonna like you specifically, but enjoy what you do. I've wrestled in front of 5 people, and I've wrestled in front of 65,000 people. So it's like there are peaks and valleys.
Yeah, right.
And I'm proud to say that I wrestled the same in front of those 5 people that I did the 65,000 people.
Love it. I love that. Yes. That's how it should be. Like,
and that's that's the thing. Like, I was down in Memphis for a few months, trying to get a contract, and I saw the politics there, and saw how some of the veterans acted and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I sat there and said, do I want to really risk it all? Like, I would love to be a champion. I would love to be on pay-per-view.
Yes.
But do I want to give up certain things and certain,
right.
feelings, because again, when you look at some of the stories that come out of the major companies, people getting fired and, guys, stealing drugs from people's bags and, guys tearing up hotel rooms and going out drinking and all this stuff. And it's like, can you navigate that?
Right.
Imagine being like 24, 25 and like having Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair come up to you going, hey kid, let's go out to the bar. What am I going to say? No.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah. And like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair especially is not a lightweight drinker. So like if you're going out to drink with Ric Flair,
he's unreal.
And I've gone out to drink with a couple of old school WWF wrestlers, and they've put me under the table if they're drinking. So I couldn't imagine doing that every night.
Right.
But that's what these guys would do. And
how the hell would they even wrestle the next day? You know what I mean? Like, how the hell?
You have to.
Yeah, right.
You have to.
I know, just function. That's so crazy.
And that's the thing. That's why you had a lot of guys dying at young ages.
Yeah.
With drugs, because you have to numb the pain to get into the ring the next night. Because imagine you shoveling snow and you come in, your back is sore. Imagine if you got to shovel again the next day, and then shovel again the next day, and the next day, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't excuse people in the pro wrestling business for using drugs. Mm-hmm. I don't judge them for it. I understand why some of them do.
Right.
Because when your body's going through some of that, sometimes you gotta numb the pain to continue if you want to do it.
Get through, yeah.
And I've seen the guys that I've wrestled guys that were in WWF that I'm their age now, that I was a young guy watching them, and I wrestled them. So like, I wrestled a 50-year-old Greg Valentine when I was like 20-something.
Did you really?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know. Oh wow, really?
Oh yes. I went out to Michigan. That was one of my mainstay areas for a long time, and we were doing a gimmick called the East Coast Invasion. This was right around the same time as the NWO was going on in WCW.
Okay, yeah.
So we were kind of mimicking that. So it was a bunch of East Coast wrestlers. It was myself, Reckless Youth, Twiggy Ramirez. I don't know if you remember, if you've ever heard of a gentleman named Twiggy Ramirez.
I like the name.
Yeah, he was part of it was part of that band.
Yeah,
that was that type of gimmick. Because there was a few guys. He had another guy with him, Madonna Wayne Gacy, that wrestled with him. Okay. They had makeup. They were really good wrestlers. There was a tag team named the Misfits, Harley Lewis and Derek Domino. You remember them? Mm-hmm. Woo, we unleashed them on the Midwest. that was so much fun. That Angel from ECW original, she came out with us. So we led this contingency to the Midwest, and we were the NWO of the East Coast invading the Midwest. And that was like, we were like the leaders out there. So like, Adam Pearce was part of the Midwest group. Mm-hmm. Wow. So, and that angle was that birthed CM Punk, Chris Hero, and Colt Cabana. Because they saw that, read about that, and wanted to do that.
Wow.
And so we went out there, and I wrestled twice in that night, and they wanted me to wrestle Valentine. So they're like, you go out and wrestle the opening match, and they put me on with a local guy. And him and I had about a 20-minute match. Really good. Crowd got into it. I didn't know that Valentine had watched the match and really, 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 really liked it. And when I came to the locker room, he pulls me into another room and goes, all right, kid, I don't normally wrestle. He goes, but I want to do it with you. So I did a lot of the bumping and stuff, but he sold a lot. He let me put him in moves. He actually let me kick him off of the figure four. Like, he spun around to do it, and when his butt was there, I kicked him off.
Yeah.
And, like, he never let anybody do that on the independents. And I was like, oh, my God. I'm getting, like, when I told Reckless Youth, everybody, like, looked at me like, you're lying. You're lying. And I was like, no, I'm not lying. And when I did it, Reckless is on the outside. There's a videotape somewhere where he's jumping up and down like he can't believe it. And he looks at me and says, I don't want you to submit right away. I was like, what? He goes, I want you to stay in it for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. He goes, and your buddies try to get in, and we're going to hold them back. And I'm like, okay. So there I am. I'm in the middle trying to get and Reckless is trying to get in, and they're pulling him out. And he, like, looks at me and goes, all right, tap. And I start tapping. The crowd goes ape shit. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, wow. He let me do a lot.
Right.
But that was sort of my reputation with the names. My first, like I told you, I was in a battle royal with Nikolai Volkov. But my first name ever was King Kong Bundy.
Really?
Yes. So you had two Jersey giants stepping in the ring and you might be able to find this. It's on an Eddie Gilbert Memorial show, either 96 or 95 or 96. And Bundy actually takes a bump for me and sells and lets me get a 2 count on him.
Really?
And he does the 5 count that he stopped doing, but I had asked him, can you do the 5 count on me? He's like, sure, kid. And I couldn't believe that. And I had the tape. I lost the tape in a move, but I watched that tape over and over again, watching him bump, and it was incredible. But I worked him. I worked the Bushwhackers.
How were that?
They were funny. They were entertaining.
I believe that.
And it's my partner that I wrestled with. Like, they didn't really like too much, so they kind of did like funny things to him. And I didn't realize they like to stick fingers up butts.
Really?
So my partner got a finger up the butt, and he was not happy about it.
Oh my
God! But they were great guys.
Yeah.
And I always found it funny that people like said Vince McMahon ruined them and destroyed them. And I said, honestly, they wrestled the same exact way, except no blood, and the anti-American rhetoric was gone.
Right.
They punched, they kicked, they bit, they hit with foreign objects. They literally were the sheep herders, just a different name.
Right.
They were entertaining. Trying to think of some. On the same show that I wrestled Greg Valentine, Don Morocco was on. He was nervous about going out to ringside and wrestling because he had no one with him. So he asked Reckless and myself to come out to ringside with him. So we went out to ringside with him to be his escorts to give him confidence.
Right.
And he had a great match. The crowd loved him. He just was a little nervous. But I was like, this is awesome that Don Morocco is asking us to go to ringside with him. Because he had noticed we were so like over as heels.
Yeah.
So I've shared a locker room with a lot of names. Mm-hmm. I actually worked Bundy twice after that in various other places.
Was it just like in the territories or like at the time or?
I worked him once in Florida. They had just brought because like they brought him down and then they needed somebody to wrestle and they were like, well, you know him, and I was like, sure, and we went out and did like a nice little 6-minute match.
Dude, so awesome.
Oh yeah, and the old timers, like those old school guys, they party.
I believe it.
Greg Valentine could drink. And I don't know how these guys survived that long, but they did.
Right.
And whenever you were on the shows with these guys, you knew it was going to be wild. Mm-hmm. And then you learned. Like I love the headbangers, but I also learned two things. You don't stand by the curtain to look at a match because they will come up behind you and push you out.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
And there were plenty of guys that got pushed out during the match and they're coming back.
Yeah.
And if there was beer served in the locker room in a pitcher, do not drink it. Just do not drink it.
No, I would not.
Reckless Youth and I got to wrestle the Rock and Roll Express.
How was that?
That was incredible. We wrestled them in Newark, New Jersey in 1999. It was a show paid for by the city.
Yeah.
Like they paid Ricky O and gave the tickets out to kids and like CYOs and such. There was about 6,000 inner city kids there. Mm-hmm. And people were like, how are you going to get the Rock and Roll Express to be, cheered here? This is rap country and stuff. And I looked at the promoter and I said, I bet you $50 that I'm going to go cut a promo that I'm going to have 5,000 city kids chanting rock and roll all night. And I went out there, cut a promo. Those kids were chanting rock and roll from the beginning of the match to the end.
What did you say? Or do you remember what, like...
I don't even remember. I insulted the CYO. And those kids just lost it.
Right.
And when they came out, they were chanting rock and roll. They popped for the double drop kick. This is 1999.
Yeah, right.
And they popped for the double drop kick at the end.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, because there was like a lot of crazy. Yeah, that's my point. When you talk the crowd and you got them into like you pissed them off and they were into it and they wanted to see you get yours and then they got it. But that's great. That's what you wanted.
You want that crowd to be invested.
Yes.
And there's a lot of if you watch old stuff from the 80s, there's a sound that you would hear where if a babyface hit a heel, you would hear the crowd go, "Oh, oh!" You don't hear that anymore.
Why do you think that is?
I really don't know why.
Yeah.
But you don't hear the crowd reacting to the punch. And I mean, I actually witnessed the Rock and Roll. I witnessed the Rock and Roll Express pop from the crowd because I wanted to watch them I used to go to the Philadelphia Civic Center when I was 14 years old.
Right.
So I got to watch the War Games live. I was second row for the War Game. I'm actually on a pay-per-view. If you have WWE Network,
I do.
I'm on one of the Halloween Havocs with the Rick. I'm actually at both Halloween Havocs, but you see me really good with the Jake the Snake and Sting.
What year was it? Do you remember?
It was like a 95-ish. It was in mid-90s. Oh yeah.
I want to see that.
Oh yeah, I have a pink stick and I'm hard cam side. I'm hard cam side. My little brother's next to me and my best friend's next to me and my little brother has a pink Sting hat that I bought for him. But I remember being there at that pay-per-view and
that's awesome.
I watched that, but I watched like 2 or 3 years of shows in the Philadelphia Civic Center. I'm a 14-year-old kid jumping on a train in Trenton with my 3 friends to a train in Philly, walking to the Civic Center, watching wrestling, and then walking back and taking the train back at like midnight.
Yeah. And
I got to see a War Games. I got to see the Lex Luger Ric Flair rematch.
Nice.
I actually got to witness the Midnight Express beating Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard before they went to the WWF because they gave their notice and it was in Philadelphia. Right. And Dusty was like, "All right, baby, just then you drop the tap after that." And we weren't expecting that. And I actually was there early because the Midnight Express were doing a meet and greet, and we had posters, and we waited in line for 2 hours to get autographs. Yeah. And I remember my brother going, "Hey, you tell J.J. Dillon his Social Security check came to my house," because he was calling J.J. Dillon old, and Cornette would say he was collecting Social Security. And that night, the title changed. Wow. And I was like, we were like, holy crap! I remember going back to, I want to say I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, and going back and like, I had the program and I was like, they title shot, and nobody believed me because now I didn't know, because again, I'm a young kid, I didn't know how TV tapings went.
Right.
So we didn't know. Now with NWA it was different because they kind of did the studios every Wednesday, but they had already taped that Wednesday for that Saturday.
Right.
So we had to wait an extra week. So when everybody went that Saturday to watch, they're like, nothing was talked about, and then it came on the following week. They were like, oh my goodness. And I was like, yeah, we got to see that happen. I was second row for the War Games, and it was when Barry Windham had turned on Lex Luger and joined the Horsemen. And I'm sitting second row right behind the Horsemen as they're going into the ring. Road Warrior Animal has Tully Blanchard in between the cage and the rope, and Barry Windham standing right there, and in this hawk gruff voice, he's like, "This is gonna be you, Barry," and he starts stomping on hard. And I'm like 15, going, "Holy shit, he's gonna kill you!"
This is amazing. Yeah.
Oh, it was the greatest thing ever, and watching pro wrestling live like that is just, and that feeling that I had, I wanted to give to other people. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that.
Right.
I never cursed on the mic, but I would curse. Like if somebody kicked me hard, I'd be like shit or like, oh fuck. But like in that sense, you're like, ooh, he's like, I'm not saying it.
Right.
But I'm in a natural, like you're like, ooh, he got kicked so hard, he said fuck.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And like having these interactions and watching these shows, you know, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I even went to shows while I was still training.
Wow.
I was.
Were you just trying to like soak everything in?
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. I was trying to be a sponge, and today I look back at it going, wow, I was witness to a lot of stuff. I went to about 6 months worth of ECW arena shows. Like I would go outside and wait with the people.
Right.
And I was training and doing shows at the Monster Factory because a couple people walk up like, "You're Don Montoya," and I'm like, "Nope." And we weren't supposed to go to shows. It was like taboo.
Right.
But I viewed it as a field trip.
Right.
I plan to be there one day. I want to hear what these people are saying, how they react, and I want to emulate that. And a few of us would go, and like I was there when the gangsters showed up and attacked the Public Enemy. I got to see every single Rey Mysterio Psychosis match and every Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko match. Wow. And like watching these guys. I was there when the Steiners, and I think it was the Steiners and Cactus Jack debuted in a 6-man match.
Love Cactus, dude.
Oh, and here's another crazy thing. Because of that, I got to meet some people in the back, and I met a few other Philly wrestlers in the crowd, and I started training at a gym called Hawkins. This was just a little tiny, crappy hole-in-wall gym. It wasn't even a real gym because there was no workout equipment. It was just a wrestling ring.
Right.
Enough, like literally enough room. Like the ring was, this would be the ring apron, and this is how it would change.
Right.
And this is how, like imagine a ring 20 feet, and then a building encompassing it, and then a bathroom on the side. That was it. New Jack used to go there every week, at least 3 or 4 times a week, and we would train with New Jack.
Wow.
Now, when people say New Jack couldn't wrestle, I will go to my grave and I will go to jail and I will say he could out-wrestle a lot of people. He learned now in Smoky Mountain.
Right.
When he came up here, he got that on a even more level because he would have just been brawling in ECW. But he, like, we would, you know, when we go to wrestling schools, like, we would train, you know, after you're wrestling, you kind of go to wrestling school to kind of, like, keep training in a way of learning new moves, learning how to do certain things, and keeping your body, you know, cardio shape.
Yeah.
And that's what we would do. And, like, we'd get 10 guys, we'd all take a corner, and 2 guys would wrestle, and then somebody would tag somebody else in, and you would exchange moves and wrestle back and forth, and then somebody else would tag. And so everybody got to wrestle everybody, and New Jack would stay in the middle, and everybody would just wrestle with him, and he would do, and when I say wrestle, I mean he would put arm locks on and exchange holds. And there was one time where I would bust his balls and say, "Oh, you never wrestle in ECW. You should wrestle once." And he invited me and Reckless and a couple other people. We were sitting not in the crow's nest that's over here, but it's the other part. That's the hard cam part.
Yeah.
And it was New Jack, Tommy Dreamer, and somebody else against Bubba Ray, Devon, and somebody else. And New Jack and Bubba Ray do a tackle, drop down, hip toss, drop kick spot. A basic opening spot.
Yeah.
And New Jack gets up and just points at me and gives me the middle finger. And everybody gets back. It was just the funniest thing ever. But,
right.
To watch him do that and, to see, know that he does other stuff, and the heart, but knowing that he could actually wrestle, and he was capable of it. I felt he could have been great in WWE.
Yeah.
He would have been great in WWE, but I also understand why he didn't go.
Yeah.
I'm a hood guy. I grew up.
He had ability. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And it's funny because I watch a lot of his. I watch those videos that they have of him and where him and Gypsy Joe had an issue, and then there was that guy in Florida and stuff, and the mass transit incident. And from somebody outside of the business, it's like, how could that happen? And it's like, if you're inside the business, that's where breaking into the business comes in.
Right.
You got certain guys that don't respect the business. And now, mass transit, I don't think New Jack wanted to kill him.
No.
But he certainly wanted him to leave and understand that next time you come into this business, you need to be respectable. And that's certain situations sometimes like that get out of control.
Right.
And
right.
Again, New Jack is the type of guy that, when I say sports entertainment, he's not sports entertainment.
Right.
He is real. He is 100% real. So it's like, a lot of guys play tough. Mm-hmm. New Jack is tough.
Yeah.
And I would like to say we had a mutual respect for each other. Mm-hmm. We worked each other a few times on Angel shows and stuff, and he never stiffed me, gave me a lot. Everything was great. My first interaction with him was at an Angel Amorosa show.
Yeah.
And he was actually wrestling somebody else, and he was beating the crap out of the guy. So Angel comes running in and goes, "I need a bunch of guys to go out there and do a pull apart and bring, New Jack back." So everybody runs upstairs, and they all start running. And it was myself, Reckless, and two other guys, and the two guys go to get up, and I stop them. No. I said, "Sit down." And they sat down. 5 minutes later, everybody comes running in and literally runs to the back of the locker room, and I hear New Jack, "If you motherfuckers ever come into my match again, I swear to God." I looked at the guys and go, "That's why you don't go upstairs." And they literally cringed in the corner while he yelled at them. Then he walked over to us and goes, "Thank you for not coming upstairs," and shook all our hands. And after that, he was cool with us.
Yeah.
And he was the type of guy that, if you know where he was from and the lifestyle that he lives, you know who he is.
Right.
You understand, and you don't poke a bear.
No, you do not.
And New Jack's not that type of guy that's going to poke you first. You know what I mean? I've had run-ins with guys that that would push people and bully people and stuff like that. And I had an incident in a ECW locker room with Tommy Rich. And he said a few things to me, and I was young in the business, and I didn't want to say anything back.
Yeah.
Now, if it was today, it'd be a different story.
Yeah.
And I mean,
how old were you?
I was about 5 years in the business.
Okay.
So
early 20s, I guess.
I had, like most guys started when they're 18. I didn't start wrestling until I was 21.
Okay.
So 4 years in the business was 25 for me,
Gotcha.
But I was still young. So it's kind of like when you're a freshman in high school and the seniors kind of you kind of take it a little bit until you're the senior, and then you give it. So that kind of happened, and it wasn't too bad, because I've dealt with other guys before like that, but I've also dealt with guys that were cool with me. Like Buddy Landell was incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Buddy Landell.
Oh yeah, of course.
He was such an incredible guy, and he was the type that would sit down and talk with every young wrestler. And if you asked him a question, he'd talk to you. And I remember I had a bad match, and this was in Yardville.
So what do you mean by like what happened? What was
the crowd just wasn't into it?
Gotcha.
They weren't like in my mind. I had this great ideas, and me and the other both had it, and we weren't meshing. It just wasn't going.
Wasn't executing, or just wasn't clicking.
Yeah, it wasn't clicking, and I didn't know enough to pull myself out of that match and turn it around. You know what I mean? Like, if something's not working, you got to go on the fly and do something different, and I didn't know how to do that at that point.
Gotcha.
So we ended that match quickly and, went to the locker room and we just didn't know what happened, And I was, depressed and upset. And I was in the locker room just sitting there, I was stressed, and I was just had my head down. And Buddy Landell sits next to me and goes, kid, he goes, everybody has bad matches. He goes, you just don't want to have too many of them.
Right.
He goes, and think about this. I've seen guys have real shitty matches, and I've seen guys who've actually shitted on themselves in a match. He goes, so you haven't shit yourself yet. And I sat there and I said, that's good advice.
Yeah, it is.
And it's old time, and it's funny because I'm kind of considered the old timer on the independent now, but I've had run-ins with guys like this, and just I worked Jake the Snake Roberts.
Dude, that's amazing.
In Connecticut.
I gotta hear about that.
Oh, that, I worked at that time. Jake was in he was in a lull.
Yeah.
So I want to say this was right around when he ended his little run in Smoky Mountain. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of
it's early 90s-ish?
It was...
Or mid-90s?
Mid-90s. Like 97-ish, 98-ish, something like that.
Okay.
He was... There was rumors that he was sober again, and then there were rumors that he wasn't.
Right.
And I remember the promoter called me up and said, hey, I got Jake for this date. And I was like, oh, cool, that's going to be awesome. And he's like, well, do you want to work him? And I'm like, do I have to? He's like, I really don't have anybody else that can work him, that I feel comfortable working him. Mm. So I was like, all right. And now, my thing is, if I'm going to get in the ring with somebody, I want them sober.
Of course. That's a pretty reasonable request.
And I told the promoter, I said, look, if he shows up to that show drunk, I'm going to beat his ass. I'm not going to get hurt for anybody. I don't care who he is. I think the promoter told him. So when I get to the show, here's Jake. And Jake goes, come here, kid. And he pulls me aside, and I don't know what's going on. He goes, come here. And he walks, and I walk into his locker room and goes, go grab your gear. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I go grab my gear, and then he goes, you're going to share my locker room with me. And he opens up a big, giant duffel bag. And I mean, it's a bag the size of this. It could fit this table in there.
Right.
It's filled with beer. And he goes, I'm not going to touch a single one till after our match. He goes, and you can sit in here and watch. And I sat in the locker room with him. We talked the match over, had everything going. He had a beer before he went out. He's like,
just one.
He goes, do you mind if I have one? I go, knock yourself out.
Just one, yeah.
And we went out and had an incredible match. Mm-hmm. Had an incredible match. Got in the locker room. I had a couple of beers with him.
Yeah.
We had a good time, got wasted. So then the promoter asked me to give him a ride home. And I said, I can't.
You're right.
And I said, my car was a mess, actually. I had a lot of shit. But I also knew that he was going to want to party, and I was not going to want to party. So they found a younger guy to drive him to his hotel and now he was staying in New York, even though the show was in Connecticut.
Right.
2 weeks later, I find out that he got this kid to take him to the Bronx to buy crack.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I wouldn't have done it.
No.
I would have kicked him out of the car at that moment.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But that's what you see. That's what you deal with,
Right.
And, like I said, I've been on shows with so many of these names.
But it was good that you were like, I'm not wrestling. Like, it's good that you took a stance. You had to.
And a few years later, in the early 2000s, it was right when Public Enemy left WCW, and before they went back to ECW, they were doing indies, and I worked a show with Johnny Grunge. I was wrestling Johnny Grunge. And I was older now. I was getting more, I was more known. So, I was kind of, flexing myself a little bit.
Right.
But I remember him walking in, like we called the match, and I was like, awesome, it's going to be great. And we were on the second half. And I see him walking in, and he's got a tray of beers. And he sits down, and I see him grab one. And I walk over, and I slapped it out of his hand. And he stood up. And I said, you're not drinking a single goddamn beer until after the fucking match. And he grabs me, and I grab him. And
it's awesome.
And Rocco Rock jumps in, and a bunch of other people jumped in. And Rocco Rock apparently had the same talk with him and told him, no more drinking.
Right.
You know this. You're not supposed to drink.
Right.
So, I was like pissed off. He was pissed off. We went out and wrestled our match. We beat the shit out of each other.
Laid it in, huh?
Laid it in. It was pretty tight, And afterwards, I went up to the bar and said, send him a bunch of beers. And they sent him beers, and I was like, enjoy. And
right.
But
after the match.
and again, that's not the only time I had to deal with somebody with and this was again with alcohol, but this is a bigger name. Matt Bourne. Doink the Clown, the original Doink the Clown.
Yeah.
I wrestled for Steel City Wrestling out in Pennsylvania.
By the way, I think he was brilliant. Like,
phenomenal.
Yeah, he really was.
Great wrestler.
Like, underrated in my opinion.
Yes, but it was his own fault.
Yeah.
His demons did it to him.
Yeah, you're right.
We were semi-main event, and I was extremely excited. I was so excited because I'm like, I'm going to be wrestling Matt fucking Bourne.
Right.
And he's doing the Born Again. He did a gimmick called Born Again, where he wore the Doink outfit.
Yes.
And had half the makeup, and it was sort of like a sinister type. So I was like, oh, it was like a gimmick and actual wrestling. We could tell a story. And I got there, and I used to tell a lot of the guys where I trained at the Monster Factory, so they would, it's kind of like going, I went to Harvard.
Right.
And it's like, Harvard! I went to the Monster Factory. That's something. Once I said that, come here, kid. We sat down. We called an incredible match. Unfortunately, he kept disappearing. And what he was doing was he was going to drink Natty Ices.
Oh.
And apparently he drank about 45 of them. And somebody said he took some pills, and he may have been smoking marijuana. And our match went from a literal 5-star match to he barely could stand. And we were going to do a simple, spot where you grab and spin him around and do the, atomic drop.
Yeah.
And when I grabbed his foot, he fell. And I felt bad because I started laying it in on him, and he wouldn't lay it in back. And I was really mad because I wanted him to hit me back because I was so pissed at him.
Right.
And then we ended up I was putting him over, so I ended up just rolling him up in I rolled him up in a schoolboy where I ended up getting pinned, and I held him on top of me because he wasn't going to hold the pin. And then I got up, I no-sold anything. I got up, I walked out walked out like I was just normal, and I was just pissed off, and I was cursing all the way in the back. And the promoter was like, "What happened?" And I explained everything. And he actually came back and apologized. He was really, really apologizing, and his friend was apologizing. And he's like, "So sorry, I didn't mean to screw up the match." And I was like, whatever. And I just pushed him out of the way and walked and got dressed and left. And I was just so disappointed,
Right.
because it's like when you meet somebody and you meet a legend, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I got to wrestle Jake.
Right.
But I met him before that he didn't remember.
Right.
And I remember him walking into the locker room, and I was sitting in a chair on a bench right here, and the toilet isn't it's like a high school gym, and have that big toilet that has the urinals and it has the toilet, and that's directly across from me. King Kong Bundy's sitting right next to me, and Jake comes walking in, and Jake is literally dragging his feet and his gear. And they're like, "Hey, Jake," and he's like,
right.
And he walks into the bathroom, and it's it's funny if you think about it in a funny sense, but it's sad.
Right.
But it was like that scene from A League of Their Own, where Tom Hanks comes in drunk, and he goes and pees, and he's peeing for a long time.
Yes.
Jake did the same exact thing, but he ended up passing out, standing up with his head against the urinal.
Oh my god!
And we had to pull him to the back, and
Jesus.
And like I remember seeing that, and I remember sitting down, and I was like Bundy looks at me and goes, "He's one of your idols, kid, huh?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, don't worry, I'm still your idol." But it's when you deal with certain people, you kind of don't want to. You kind of want to be excited, like, oh my God, I'm meeting somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine being an actor, going to Hollywood and meeting all your actors, people you want to act with, and it's like they're jerks or they're a-holes,
Right.
And like, I met the Road Warriors, and my first job ever running a locker room, they were in it. And it was with the NWA. Dennis Carluzzo was the guy then, and he was like, Montoya, do you want to run the show? And I was like, sure. And I didn't know what I was doing. He explained a couple things, and then, I was the opening match, and I ended up, whoever I was wrestling, I ended up putting him over for the win. And I come to the back, and Road Warrior Hawk stops me and goes, "You're doing it wrong, kid." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You got the book. You're supposed to be in the main event winning." And then he just started laughing. And the Road Warriors were so nice. Mm-hmm. I had a 20-minute, and this is going to sound weird, I had a 20-minute argument with Road Warrior Hawk about who the greatest receiver in the NFL is.
Ooh, I like to dip my toe in here.
His is Randy Moss, and I am a 49er fan,
Okay.
so it's Jerry Rice.
I love this. This is so funny you mentioned this, because I'm Jerry Rice, and my father-in-law says Randy Moss. So that's so funny that you pointed that out.
We were having a shouting match.
Yeah.
And my buddy goes, "Do you know you just were shouting at Road Warrior Hawk and saying he doesn't know shit about football?" I was like, "When it comes to football, yes, I'll yell at anybody." But he was like, they were so cool.
Yeah.
Just meeting them. And here's the thing that sucks, because I'm saying all these names.
Yeah.
But I don't have any memories to, you know what I mean? Like no autographs, no pictures, because
that's okay.
at that time, that was taboo.
Right.
It's like, don't you start taking pictures with them, you know what I mean?
Kayfabe,
Yeah, so it's like, and it's like, in my head, I shouldn't have said, I shouldn't have taken it as a picture as a fan. I should have said, hey, I'm a colleague, and, you take pictures with your colleagues.
Right.
And, because like people are like, you met the Road Warriors? You met this person? You were on a show with this person? I had Hacksaw Jim Duggan mad at me for a little bit. We were on a show in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And this was right after his cancer scare, and he got, he went through his everything, and he was given a clean bill of health. We're doing a show, and he was the main event, and he wanted to go fast. So he was telling everybody to cut their matches. And I kept seeing him going outside. And I'm like, what's he going outside for? And when I looked, he was smoking a cigarette. And I'm like,
what are you doing, dude?
I was like, you son of a bitch is smoking. So he comes up to us and told us to cut our match short. Everybody says yes, and I'm like, I'm not cutting my match short. So everybody's trying to cut the match short, and I'm in the match extending everything.
Oh, it's so
people
funny.
are going for pins. It's supposed to be the finish, and I'm stopping the ref. And they're like, what are you doing? And I extended the match another 10 minutes, and Duggan cursed me out when I went back in there. And he's yelling at me with his 2x4 on his shoulder. So I'm getting yelled at by Jim Duggan with a 2x4 on his shoulder.
God.
Like I said, I sort of have CM Punk in me where I rub people the wrong way. And it's not like I mean to do it.
Yeah.
But there's, I also learned by being bullied at certain points that sometimes you got to stick up for yourself.
You have to.
Because the guys won't respect you.
Yep.
And like when I was down in Memphis, I had a little thing with Jim Neidhart. And we were on a show, and I had a towel on my neck, and he had just got done taking a shower, and he was like, "Hey, I need a towel." And he took my towel and dried himself off with it, and I was like, oh, "What an asshole." But I wasn't going to say anything, you know what I mean?
Right.
This is Jim Anvil Neidhart. What am I going to say to him?
Right.
So then I'm talking with somebody else, and then he walks over and goes, "Hey, here's your towel back," and he laughs, and he throws it at me, and it hits me in the face. So then I grab it, and I said, "Keep it, you son of a bitch," and I threw it back in his face. And he turned, come towards me, and I went to step towards him, and then everybody jumped in the middle. back off. But, you know, you have to sort of kind of, you know what I mean? Kind of sometimes have to step your ground.
If you don't put your foot down, he's going to keep doing things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are the things that I heard about in locker rooms in the old WWF days, you know, with the British Bulldogs and the Rougeau brothers. I don't know if you've ever read any wrestling books, but Dynamite Kid, have you ever read his book?
No.
Read
book.
That's a guaranteed read. You must read Dynamite Kid's book. Bret Hart's first book with the WWF was a great book. Mm-hmm. He explains a lot of stuff. But Dynamite Kid tells a story of how he and the Rougeaus did not like each other, and Jacques Rougeau hit him with a pair of brass knuckles. Dynamite Kid didn't go down.
Oh, we didn't sell it.
This was a real punch in the locker room.
Oh, this is a real. When he didn't go down after
did not go. He hit the wall and turned around and actually beat him up.
Oh my god.
That's how tough Dynamite Kid was.
That's insane.
But that's the type of, you know, you're in a locker room with testosterone driven guys.
Yeah.
You're just an alpha males. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to be an alpha male. And sometimes you just, you know, some guys are alpha males all the time. Some guys just have to be it once. You know,
right.
You know, and sometimes you rub into people, and sometimes you try to avoid certain people. You know, but when you're on shows all the time, you know, you have to learn how to, you know, okay, I don't like this guy, but I'll be on a show with him.
Right.
And you may even have to wrestle that person. Mm. I mean, you've heard the stories of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, and you know, that's like, when you look at that, and then you watch them wrestle, and you're like, wow, like this is crazy that they don't like each other, and then they're out there wrestling each other. And that's where the trust in the business comes, because it's like, I'm telling somebody to climb up 25 feet to jump off the top and land on me. And with any slight move, they could cripple you.
Right.
You know,
dangerous business.
I remember talking with D'Lo not too long after the whole Draws incident.
I know, horrible.
And that really affected him.
Like, of course. I mean,
you know, nobody wants to, and it wasn't his fault. Do you know what I mean? Like right. The whole, but when you are holding somebody or you have them in a hold,
yeah,
you kind of feel you're responsible for that person,
right?
You know, and you know that's another thing where I didn't like doing crazy moves, because I'm like, listen, that person might have a kid or a wife, you know. I remember a few years ago there was a wrestler that ended up in a hardcore match like slicing his arm or something. He had a feud with Jim Cornette for a little while, but like he had a wife and a kid, and I'm like, you know, you should sometimes think about these things before you do certain spots.
Crazy spots, yeah.
You know, because it's like, you know, we're to entertain the crowd, but we're really not supposed to kill ourselves.
Right.
You know, it's
a fine line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and you get that line, and when you can make people go, wait a minute, was that real? Was that real?
That's it. That's what you want.
That's the line that you want.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a ton of matches that are out on WWE Network that you will watch. There's a particular match between Bret Hart and Dynamite Kid. I have to remember the date and where I saw it. But there are 3 spots that Dynamite does moves to Bret Hart that I swear on my mother's grave he stiffed him. And one of them is a knee drop from the second rope where he hits Bret literally right here. I don't know if, I don't know if he stiffed him or not, but it looks, as a kid when I saw it live happen, I was like, oh my God. Right. And as an adult knowing the business,
right,
I know that was holy crap. Mm-hmm. But it still looks real.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a whole plethora of wrestlers that you would look at from the 80s that you would go, holy crap, are these guys really killing people?
Right,
you know, like, I don't know if you've ever watched Ronnie Garvin wrestle.
Not too much, no.
This guy was I honestly believe in his prime, he could have destroyed Brock Lesnar.
Wow.
That's how.
I gotta look him up then. That's crazy.
Him and Ric Flair had some phenomenal match. Starrcade '87. Go watch Starrcade '87. That steel cage match. People dislike it because of the booking of it.
Right.
And this was Starrcade '87 was at the time where that was the beginning of the wars.
Right.
You know, Vince was expanding. And that was also, that matched up, that was the two supercards. So you had WrestleMania 3, and then in November was Starrcade, which was NWA's WrestleMania. Ric Flair against Ronnie Garvin matches up in a technical sense to Ricky Steamboat and Savage.
Right. Okay. Right.
Imagine having Ricky Steamboat and Savage as a main event, but not having that hype behind it. Right. And that was the problem. Like, Ronnie Garvin was a solid wrestler, tough as nails. But where we were going with pro wrestling, he wasn't really great promo. Like, he was a very boring promo.
Yeah, see that.
And like, if you can't get that crowd behind you, what are you going to do?
Right.
And if the crowd's not there,
there's like no move in the world. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And when you want to talk about chops, the chops in that match, watch that match. The chops in that match will have you waking up in the middle of the night going, There was legitimate blood on Ric Flair's chest. He had a gash about that big on his chest from chops.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Jesus.
Those two had, and they had great scientific matches. Like, they had great mixtures because, like, they could wrestle, they could brawl, they had great cardio, like, so they could they could go all night, and they would wrestle each other 10 different places and have 10 different matches.
Right.
And have 10 different finishes. And remember, this is before, finishing maneuvers had to be the finish of the match. Right. Like, Ric Flair used the figure 4, but there weren't too many times that he ended the match with it. He, like, hurt people with it. It was, you know what I mean? So when when Hogan started using the leg drop and everybody started having a finisher, that's when it became his finisher. But, I mean, Flair, like, he used to use tons of different moves. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, he lost the title to Kerry Von Erich in a backslide. Like, think about that.
Yeah, right.
Who would think of calling a backslide in 2025 to the finish of a pay-per-view style show?
Wouldn't happen. No way.
Nope. No. I got to go down with a big move, and it's like,
yeah.
But that was the mentality of pro wrestling back then, and how it kept people fresh. Because, like, Ric Flair didn't get beat with a big finishing maneuver and soundly, so he could come back to win the title later.
Right.
So there's different types of bookings and stuff going on back then with today. And, I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves with pro wrestling today, and this was Vince McMahon's problem, is how guys have to change their gimmicks when they travel. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it should have been Big Daddy Cool Diesel and Razor Ramon in WCW.
Yep.
And Vince should have cut a deal saying, all right, listen, give me 10%.
Yeah, right.
Whatever T-shirts you sell, whatever stuff you sell.
It was pride.
Yeah. And, guys because like Vince would go, oh, these guys aren't fresh anymore. Well, Randy Savage was in WWF for what, 9 years? Nobody's going to stay fresh for that long. Mm-hmm. The best thing for him was to go to someplace else and then come back.
You got, like, rejuvenated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's basically that's how the territory system used to work. If you were in New York with Vince McMahon Sr., and you were the champion, you ran through everything, and it's like, what do you got to do? You know how they say, kid, we don't got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon Sr.'s pick up the phone. Hey, Mike Graham, who was the guy who ran Florida, I'm going to send you down this guy. Mm-hmm. Okay, send him down. I'm sending you this guy. And they would send talent. So then you now had a fresh new babyface or heel that nobody in that territory has seen. And he could do all his things all over again. Mm-hmm. And it's all brand new.
Right.
And he could be there for 2-3 years. And then, all right, he's bored there. Call up Fritz Von Erich.
Right.
In Dallas.
Right.
And you go to Dallas. Or you call up Mid-South. Or you call the Pacific Northwest. Or you call San Francisco. Had its own whole territory.
And then it would recycle again, right?
Yep. And that's what guys would do. And then, you would be able to, you would have a 50-year career. Mm-hmm. But, when you're with a major company like WWE, the world sees all these things.
Right.
Because, like, you had that feud with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens in
Yes.
WWF. It was a great feud.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also in a Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I saw that match. It's crazy.
So it's like
bananas.
Oh yeah, but that's how it works. Feuds in certain areas became major feuds in the major areas.
Right.
I mean, you could sit back and look at WWF from like 84 to like 89, and it literally is Mid-South Wrestling.
Right, yeah.
It's Mid-South Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
You had Jake the Snake Roberts, One Man Gang, Ted DiBiase.
Yep.
And these guys were selling, and see, that's, one of the things that Vince was able to pull off was that he said, oh, I'm the only one that's selling out major places. And it's like, no, other companies were doing it also.
Yeah, he was plucking from all the...
Exactly.
territories.
Mid-South was selling out the Superdome on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Junkyard Dog against Butch Reed in a ghetto street fight sold out. The Superdome.
As it should.
Yeah. And like that's how that crowd, the Freebirds. Mm-hmm. The Freebirds sold that place out. So, when you look at Vince told a lot of lies to become, like with WrestleMania. Everybody's like WrestleMania 1 and blah, he revolutionized the business. And it's like, really? I mean, Dusty Rhodes and Starrcade 83, which was on pay-per-view down south and on closed circuit, they did it first.
Right.
Even WrestleMania 2 originated from multiple places.
It did.
Starrcade did the same thing before them.
Right.
So, Vince McMahon, he was very smart on how he got what he got. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard Cornette's stories of how he plucked talent and stuff like.
I have, yeah.
So Vince McMahon, honestly, he's lucky he's still alive. Yeah. Because it's imagine going into different mob territories and taking their best workers.
Right.
And that's exactly what he did.
What he was doing.
So he did this, and he took ideas like pay-per-views, and he's like, it's my idea. Now Vince had the connections also, because Dick Ebersol, he was in New York, right there, New York City. He got on NBC. I mean, hell, look, he hooked up with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He had 2 huge pay-per-views in Atlantic City. So Vince had the connections. When you look at the companies and you look at actual wrestling, what was more entertaining? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Hogan did what he did, but you had Flair and the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express and the Horsemen. It was such a different type things. But I felt both could have succeeded. You know what I mean? Like, you could have had both.
Oh, yeah.
Because WCW did prove that for a long time. And did prove when you put money behind something with connections, it could succeed.
You could thrive. Yeah.
It could succeed.
Yeah.
And I mean, AEW's trying their best.
Yeah, I just feel like there's something missing, and I don't really have a finger to put on it, or I don't know if it's like the feuds aren't exciting. I don't know. What do you think?
I heard on Jim Grant podcast that he doesn't have production meetings, and I've spoken to people that have worked for AEW, and basically it's kind of like an indie show where he'll have an idea and then somebody will change his mind for that idea. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the problem. The problem is he wants to make everybody happy.
You can't.
And you can't.
It's impossible.
I joke around saying, if he gave me 5 minutes, I would change that company around so many things. I mean, I would literally have who's going to be the next few champions for the next few years already scripted out.
Right.
And that's exactly Vince McMahon Sr. would do that. When superstar Billy Graham won the title, he told him, you're winning the title. Yes, you're going to lose it on this date. Mm-hmm. Didn't even know who, but he told him, you're going to lose it on this date.
Wow.
And with wrestling, you're dealing with egos. You're dealing with people. And everybody wants to be champion.
Right. But everybody can't be champion.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I told, the SPO management and win management in New York. It's like, listen, not everybody could be a champion.
Right.
If you need me to tell people that, I will let them know that. Because, I mean, you could do storylines and angles where everybody could be a champion. Do you know what I mean?
But then that would lose its
Exactly.
mystique of
Exactly.
being a champion.
Not everybody could be a champion.
Now it's not special anymore.
Not everybody could win a Super Bowl. Not everybody could
Right.
win. So it's like the title should be like WWE has so many titles.
Right. I'm not a fan of that, if I'm being honest with you.
It dilutes it.
Yeah. Yes. I like the I like the world title. I like the Intercontinental because that was kind of like the second guy or girl coming up. And I don't know, maybe the hardcore title, kind of like, I'm not gonna lie, but that was it.
No, I always felt the way this should be structured today should be you should have the world champion,
Of course.
and he floats between Raw and SmackDown. And now you have individual titles for Raw and SmackDown. The US title for Raw, Intercontinental for SmackDown. So that's the show's top title.
Mm-hmm. And it's a business; they're trying to make titles,
and you could do the same thing with the tag titles. You have the tag champions that float in between, and then you could have two tag team secondary titles for that to be floated. So the champions go back and forth. Now you're having, you should have it down to where it's just, three titles. Women's title, the men's title, and then I like the hardcore title, but unfortunately
it's a gimmick thing. I'm not gonna lie. I do like it.
It's become gimmicky.
Yeah.
I used to like a title called the Brass Knuckles title, which was basically a hardcore title, there was no rules. You could fight wherever you wanted. It was a hardcore, but it was called the Brass Knuckles title.
Right.
And they had brass knuckles on the belt, which was pretty cool. Like the TV title was for television.
Right.
And again, with pro wrestling, back then, pro wrestling shows were the infomercial for the house shows. So you watched TV and wanted to go to the house shows. But now, when you watch Raw, it has main event matches.
Yeah.
You're not going to see 10 jobbing matches and then one big main event. When Eric Bischoff jumped in with Nitro, it was like, okay, we're going to compete. And the only way he could compete was put those big name matches. But why would people want to go to the arenas live then?
Right.
To see it.
If you just watch it at home.
Yeah. That, Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair never wrestled on pay-per-view or on TV singles in WWF when they were there.
Wow.
If you wanted to see Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan wrestle, you had to go to the arena. Do you know how many sold-out arenas they had?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't, you see them in tag matches.
Right.
You'll see a clip or two, but Vince was like, nope, you're going to pay for that to see that. And that was brilliant.
Hell yeah.
And then when he went to WCW, they wrestled all the time. And kind of Vince McMahon kind of killed it also because, during the Attitude Era, you'd have Stone Cold and The Rock wrestle like 8 times before WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. And it's like, they should have had limited contact.
Right. Build it.
Yeah, and kind of like I loved when you had Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker when they had the pull apart and you didn't have them wrestle every other match.
Right. It
was like that main event.
It was a little taste. It was a little taste of what.
Yeah. And that's the way the business, was being booked back then. But again, with social media, the internet, Netflix has Raw.
Right.
Like, I'm sitting there going, there's no Monday Night Wrestling on cable. This hasn't happened since 1973. Mm-hmm. Because before USA Network had primetime, it had Joe Blanchard's USA or USA All-Star Wrestling, and then they would have other little companies. But there was always some type of wrestling on USA Network, especially on Monday nights. And it's not there anymore.
It's crazy to think about, right?
And think about this. Saturday morning wrestling used to be the prime time. And then at 8:05. But now pro wrestling is all during the week. And you don't find it on regular TV. Mm-hmm. The internet.
Yep.
I've started to watch all the episodes of Juggalo Championship Wrestling. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. It's different. It's a whole different take on it. And it's like, this would have never happened 20, 30 years ago.
Nope.
You didn't have the options
right.
that we have today. people could play video games with somebody from across the globe.
It's amazing. It's really, it blows my mind even thinking about it. Even today,
Like, I remember my first wrestling game it was just called Pro Wrestling.
Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo Pro Wrestling. And it had...
Starman.
Yeah. And the Piranha. I used to love to play as Piranha because he would bite people's head. And he was my George the Animal Steel. And my friends would get mad because they're like, you just like biting everybody and making them bleed. I'm like, yeah, it's fun. But like, think about that game. And then think about this game.
I know.
And I'm like, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. My first video game system was the Atari 5200. It fell off the back of a truck.
Nice.
And I had one game, and it was Pac-Man. And I played that game to death. Me and my family played it to death. And I remember, saving up and getting, like me and my brothers worked our butts off and got a Nintendo 64, and to imagine having a pro wrestling game on it. And then, like having certain wrestlers, and then it evolved. And like, I remember WrestleFest, the big art. There's a deli in Trenton, South Trenton, called Kim's Deli. It's still there today.
Is it really?
I don't know if the Stain family owns it or not, but it's still there today.
Wow.
They got WrestleFest, and me and my friends kept that game in business. We would leave school, and we would show up with quarters stacked, and we would have tournaments. And like, he actually would have to shut it down. Like,
so funny.
But we would stay there and play that. But wrestling, to see the evolving of the game, to the point where it's like you had a limited moveset, limited wrestlers to choose from, and now you could literally you could have a dream match. Like, you could create the Piranha.
Yeah.
And have Piranha wrestle Roman Reigns.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's amazing. Like, well, to this day, I think No Mercy is the best wrestling game. That's controversial. Well, not controversial, but it's an amazing game.
No Mercy and WCW versus the World. Mm-hmm. Those two games are very, very.
I played No Mercy last year and I streamed it, and like I haven't played it in 20 years. However long, probably longer. And I couldn't believe like how fun it still was, and like it played well. Like it played pretty good. Like.
Yeah, and it was so basic. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's the thing with wrestling. Does this have a like career mode and stuff?
Yeah.
Like those are fun and those are nice, but like people just want to play football. Like they want to play football. They don't want to be a college player to go there.
Right.
You want to be a wrestler.
I just want to do an exhibition match.
Exactly. I want to grab Ric Flair and I want to put him in the ring with Jey Uso. That's my crazy. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like. To see the games have evolved to a point where there's a story in a pro wrestling video game, and I like video games, but I also play it's a card based game, and you could get it on your Android phone. It's called 80s Mania Wrestling, and there's no actual physical wrestling. You collect cards, and you try to get ratings. And you're basically the promoter of the show. Right. So you build up you get a calendar and every Saturday's a show and they build up to pay-per-views, your monthly pay-per-view. So you can actually build up a physical show to the point you get characters and you could, they don't use copyrighted characters. Right. So there's a Hulk Hogan in the game, but his name is Dude Broham. But he looks like Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And then there's the NWO version of that. Mm-hmm. So, and there's a Ric Flair guy on there. His name is Jet Set Strutter, and he looked like his card he looks just like Ric Flair. So, even in this, it's I call it a promoter game because you play as the promoter, and you could you don't watch the matches, but it shows you who wins, who loses, and the wrestlers can get hurt, and you can't control who wins titles, if a champion, you could build somebody up to get a title shot,
right?
And you may not get that. You might want that person to win, and they may not, and you can't change it. You just create the show. It's kind of like watching how you let the match go on.
Just let it go. Yeah. Whoever wins.
There's a team on this game called the Master Blasters, and they are basically like the Road Warriors. And every single person who plays this game knows if you put the tag team titles on these guys, it will take years to take them off. Because you go through cycles. So, and here's the cool thing is, certain wrestlers are only available during certain periods. So there's a Dusty Rhodes type character, but he's only available during certain, like from 82 to like 95.
Gotcha.
So, and they have, like, if you look at the game, you'll know who the certain characters are. Like there's a Midnight Rockers, Rock and Roll Express type characters.
Yeah, right.
There's a Midnight Express type character. There's a Jim Cornette type character. There's a Bobby Heenan type manager card type character.
Yeah.
There's a Fabulous Moolah type. Like, it's so incredible. I've been playing this game since 2016. I have a Facebook group that has 7,000 members.
I have to join this.
It's 80s wrestling. Like, if you go on your Android and type in 80s Wrestling Mania, you'll see it. They have an 80s Mania, and then they have a modern one. Which has a lot more. It's more similar to modern. Like this takes more like 80s, 90s, early 2000. The modern one is more with modern wrestling today. But it's funny because like a lot of the people in the group are old school wrestling fans, and they watch modern wrestling, but they also like the old school stuff.
Yeah.
So it's wrestling is an incredible business.
It is.
It has fans all over the globe.
I can honestly say, I fell into this by accident. Like, long story short, I made a TikTok. I bought 22 and made a TikTok off of it, like a little video. It was actually Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero. They did a showcase match. It would go from in-game to cutscenes of the match. Really cool. And the video did really well. And now I'm streaming this, and it's wrestling fans are the best. Like, they really are. They're diehard, and they're not afraid to tell you what they feel. And when they love you, they love you. Like, I don't know. They're just a good crowd.
They travel. I have friends and coworkers who always laugh, and they always joke because I always say, if I hit the lottery, I'm going to run a wrestling business. And they're like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because if you put something out there that wrestling fans like, they will follow it. And they will invest in it, and they will travel. If they like it, they will go.
Yes.
And that's all you have to do. Just give them something that they like. And they're getting it in some places. I mean, it may not be the big boom that, the 2000s was, but I mean, you have WWE. You have AEW.
There's a lot of wrestling out there.
You have ROH is still around. TNA is still around. You got New Japan is still around.
Yeah.
Now you got, Juggalo Championship Wrestling. You've got you got GCW.
GCW, yeah.
You have a bunch of, I don't want to call them indies, but, they're more than an indie, but not as big as a major company. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I guess it's a minor company. And, you've got a lot of these opportunities to do these things and to showcase your talent. And that's just on the East Coast. Like California, you got down in Florida. There's a few people that have moved from up here that I've trained with that are wrestling down in Florida still. And I'm like, wow, there's still more indies down there that are, and it's starting to come back.
Hell yeah.
It's starting to come back.
Yes, it is. Don Montoya, thanks for coming, man.
Oh,
I really enjoyed this. Like, seriously.
It was my pleasure.
Guys, Don Montoya, do you have any socials or anything like that? No?
I don't have a really big social media presence. I'm one of the older guys.
Sometimes it's better that way.
Yeah, I put it this way. Me and CM Punk would definitely be in a lot of trouble if I had more social media.
Guys, thanks again for showing up to the stream. Don Montoya, ladies and gentlemen.
Take it easy, everybody.
I'll see you on the next stream, everybody. Take care.